Chapter 2087. Longdu sat under a rock outside the monastery. The young man in white had entered the monastery for longer than he had expected. So far, he hadn't heard anything, but he wasn't worried. He was worried about something else. A few ants appeared on his body. The ant had drilled out from a crack in the ground and slowly crawled all the way until it finally crawled onto his body and crawled onto his cheek. He was guessing when these ants would open their sharp teeth and bite down. When they bit him, he would have a reason to slap them down. More importantly, it would be enough to trample them to death. A slight prickling sensation came out of nowhere. Without saying a word, Langdo slapped himself in the face. At that moment, the door of the monastery slowly opened. Slap! The ants weren't hit. They fell to the ground. Longdu didn't have time to care about the ants. He hurried forward to welcome the young man in white. Only the young man in white walked out of the door. The one in the monastery didn't seem to want to show up. "Don't look," the young man in white said indifferently. "She can't leave this place easily." Longdu nodded. He knew some things, but he didn't know why they were like this. It wasn't something he could handle. When he was about to leave, he saw a figure in the attic of the monastery. Longdu turned around instinctively and saw the nun standing in the attic, waving a handkerchief in her hand, as if she was saying, "Come here often." Longdu shook his head, trying to get rid of this scene from his mind. He looked at the young man in white and asked in a low voice, "My lord, you've done what you asked. You can say yes or no." The young man in white shook his head and said, "Let's go to the city of Dawn now." Longdu nodded. He didn't forget the purpose of this trip, to find out the truth behind the production of the illegal drugs. The young man in white stroked his chest. The words of the nun before he left still rang in his ears. "Mirror, I'll give you a mark of the goddess. It should be able to expel the strange power hidden in you. If it still can't be expelled, then you deserve to vomit blood. But I can't make up for the blood you spat out. You have to eat more to replenish your blood. Also, don't try to influence other people's wives and daughters again. You have to influence her husband first. You've already influenced the head of the family. So how far are you from influencing the entire family?" The most important thing for a family was to be complete. What a nagging fellow, the white-clothed youth thought. However, the loss of 30% of the origin source due to the second round of coughing up blood was not something that could be easily replenished. At the very least, the world sources of 10 subworlds would have to be extracted before it could be barely replenished. Could it be that something had happened to Dongrami village? His heart suddenly stirred. This was a thought that came to him on a whim. Shortly after dawn, Nan Xiaonan and Mr. Asakes returned with the news of Levi's disappearance. This directly dampened Mr. Asash's joy when he saw Boss Luo return safely. Good news and bad news come one after another. I can't rest. By the way, Mr. Jacques invited us to stay in his house temporarily. When we meet later, I'm afraid that Mr. Jacques will have to add Laval's name to the search list. What I mean is, shouldn't we bring something when we visit him? It would be more appropriate. Mr. Asakes, what do you think is suitable? Nan Xiaonan asked casually. Although she was asking, she secretly and suspiciously glanced at Boss Luo and Miss Asakes. She wondered if these two guys did anything strange before she and Mr. Asakes came back. It was totally possible. After all, Ludic and the male assistant were unconscious. As for the maid, Kay or Lily. Kay or Lily, the sun is shining on your butt. Wake up. Nan Xiaonan directly pushed the maid who was lying on her stomach and snoring. It's dawn. Oh no. I'm going to wipe this signboard. I don't want to have my salary deducted. The maid woke up and looked around in a daze. She was surrounded by people who looked at her. Mr. Arthashes rolled his eyes and pointed at his own lips. Only then did Kalili awkwardly wipe away the traces of water at the corner of her mouth. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the guest house. A young man with super short hair pushed the door and entered. "Hello, my name is Bertrand. I'm Mr. Jacques' subordinate. I came here, according to Mr. Jacques, ordered to take you to his house. If you have any luggage, I can do it for you." "Bertrand, sir," Miss Servant Girl suddenly shouted. The young man was a little surprised at this time. He didn't know why this beautiful lady called his name directly. He calmed down and said calmly, "Yes, I'm Bertrand. Miss, how can I help you?" "Nothing." Miss Maid chuckled. "I just want to remember Mr. Bertrand's name to strengthen my memory." "I see." Although the young Bertrand was a little confused, he quickly nodded. He looked at everyone and said, "Well, it's getting late. Please follow me. Mr. Jacques has already asked someone to start preparing lunch. He will personally receive all of you." "We have 2 patients here," Mr. Assaix suddenly said. Bertrand said, "This must be Mr. Assaix. Please rest assured, Mr. Jacques has already ordered, so I also brought a few people and transportation tools." "Mr. Bertrand is very careful," Miss Maid said with a smile. Bertrand just smiled politely as a response. Soon, after some packing, Ludic and the male assistant were moved to a wooden cart used for transporting goods. It was pushed by people. Boss Luo and others, led by the young Bertrand, walked to Mr. Jacques' residence in the village. So, although Mr. Jacques is the owner of a farm, the farm doesn't look big. He's not a noble, so how can he have so much wealth? Not only did he build a big house in the village, but he also built the Rose Mansion on the other side of the forest. Nan Xiaonan suddenly lowered her voice at this time so that her voice could be heard by everyone. In fact, the strangest thing was the Rose Mansion. Rose Mansion was in the Free City. After coming to Remy's village, it still existed, but it was built by Mr. Jacques. Moreover, everyone in the village knew about this. "You don't know?" Bertrand turned around and looked at everyone curiously. Nan Xiaonan blinked as if she didn't care that Bertrand heard her words. She said, "Mr. Bertrand, as foreigners, what do you think we know?" "You're right." Bertrand nodded and then said, "Actually, this is because..." Bertrand's voice suddenly stopped, and he looked at the road outside the village. Then he frowned slightly. Everyone looked over because of Bertrand's action. Not far away, dust rose, and they saw a group of cavalrymen riding their horses quickly. "What's going on? Are the Burgundian cavalrymen here again?" Kate Air Lily subconsciously grabbed Sash's arm. "It's not the Burgundian cavalrymen." Bertrand's serious expression suddenly disappeared, and then he showed a touch of joy. "Do you see the flag they're holding high? That's the flag of the royal family. I can't be wrong. That's the royal emblem." "You can't be wrong. How can a villager in a remote village recognize the royal family's flag?" Nan Xiaonan immediately narrowed her eyes, but seeing that the boss and the servant girl didn't change their expressions, she didn't mention it. She just thought for a while and said, "This group of cavalrymen seems to be heading towards Mr. Jacques' big house." "Yes, that's the direction to Mr. Jacques' house." Bertrand nodded, and then he said quickly, "Maybe something big happened. Everyone, let's speed up." For the rest of the journey, Bertrand looked anxious and didn't say anything. He took a short time to finish the rest of the journey and led the group to Mr. Jacques' big house. At this time, the group of cavalrymen holding the royal flag had already stopped in front of Mr. Jacques' mansion. When Bertrand led everyone in, they saw that Mr. Jacques had already led people to greet this group of cavalrymen in front of the door. Mr. Jacques noticed that Bertrand brought a few foreigners back, and he also saw the brave young man who saved him in the house. After giving Boss Luo a kind look, Mr. Jacques waved his hand quietly to let Bertrand take the guests to rest first. "Who are those people?" A man in his 30s and the cavalryman asked in a deep voice. The man was the leader of the cavalrymen, and he called himself York. In the kingdom, he had the title of Baron. Mr. Jacques said calmly, "They are the workers of my family's farm. I called them to come and do some groceries." Baron York nodded casually and didn't care too much. Then he walked into the big house under Mr. Jacques' greeting. Baron York only brought 2 cavalrymen with him as his personal guards. The rest of the cavalrymen were standing outside the mansion. These cavalrymen were scattered around the mansion as if they were standing guard. In the hall, the maid served tea and then left with her head bowed. The maid just closed the door of the room where Mr. Jacques received guests, and suddenly she was shocked. Miss, what's wrong with you?" "Shuh, don't talk. The kitchen seems to be calling you. Go and see. Here, I'll take care of it." "Okay." The maid sighed and said, "Miss, it's up to you. I can't take care of it this time." "You're too naggy." The girl stared at the maid and then said, remember to let the kitchen make lunch more sumptuous. We have to entertain guests at noon." The maid nodded and said, "I know. I won't neglect these cavalrymen." "Baron, there is a baron here. Why would he come to such a remote place like ours? Really, will he take a fancy to our food here? I'm so worried." "Who said to prepare food for these cavalrymen?" The girl snorted. The maid was startled and said suspiciously, "Not these cavalrymen." "Oh, I know. Miss, you mean those foreigners? Go and do your work." "Yes, yes, yes, I'll go now." The maid rolled her eyes and then directly put the tray of tea in the girl's hand. "Then, I'll leave this place to you, Miss Jenna. Who's the master here?" The girl couldn't help but roll her eyes at this time. If it weren't for the fact that she had been taking care of Jean since he was young, her salary would be deducted. Watching the maid leave, the girl's eyes suddenly turned. She suddenly thought of a good idea. She hurriedly ran to the servant's room and changed into a set of maid's clothes. In the reception room, Mr. Jacques was sitting upright. Baron York was a bit more casual. As for the two cavalrymen who followed him into the room, they were standing behind Baron York, looking straight ahead. Although this is a remote place, the decoration here is quite elegant. Baron York chuckled. As expected of a man from the capital, after so many years, your taste hasn't been left behind by these rural people. "I don't know why Baron York is here this time," Mr. Jacques said indifferently. "If it's for business, I think I should recommend you to see our village chief, Mr. Charles." "I'm here to see you," Baron York said directly. "I'm here on His Majesty's order. Just this morning, the royal family's urgent document was sent to me through the church's channel in the shortest time possible. Then, it took me 6 hours to travel through the night and come here." "The royal family?" Mr. Jacques frowned, as if he had fallen into a huge question because of this news. "Why is the royal family looking for me?" Baron York said, "Last night, the kingdom's grand priest, Tanchi, prophesied that a saint would appear in the distant village of Domremy. At first, I didn't believe it, but I could see the pillar of light soaring into the sky and the strange phenomenon in the sky at night, so I believed it." "Grand priest." Mr. Jacques took a deep breath. Did he really say that? "Of course, I can't hear it from the grand priest himself," Baron York said indifferently. "But this was written in His Majesty's urgent document. Do you think it's fake?" Mr. Jacques shook his head and asked tentatively, "If that's the case, Mr. Baron, you can go to the village chief. The village chief obviously knows more about the affairs in the village than I do." "I can't help it." Baron York crossed his arms and leaned back. He looked at Mr. Jacques and said with a faint smile, "In the grand priest's words, the new saint came from your family. If I don't look for you, who else can I look for?" "How is this possible?" Mr. Jacques was shocked. "How can a person like me be favored by the royal family?" Baron York said, "Mr. Jacques, I won't talk nonsense with you anymore. I'm here to bring the new saint back. This is the royal family's order. I don't think you'll disobey the royal family's order. The one who abducted Princess Isabel is a sinful man, Jacques d'Arc." Clang! In front of the reception room, a short-haired maid knocked over the tea and snacks. The short-haired maid opened her mouth slightly and looked at Baron York in disbelief. Seeing this, Mr. Jacques immediately shouted angrily, "Who let you in? You have no manners at all. Is this how I usually teach you? From now on, you don't have to work here anymore. Get out." The short-haired maid seemed to be scared silly and froze. "Didn't you hear me? I told you to get out." Mr. Jacques roared, "What a trash. I should have watched you being taken away by the Burgundians instead of redeeming you. What a waste of my food. Get out. Don't let me see your face again." The short-haired maid was terrified. She opened her mouth, lowered her head, and rushed out while covering her face. "She's just an insensible maid." "Mr. Jacques, do you have to be angry?" Baron York smiled amusedly. "Or Mr. Jacques lost his composure because of what I said just now? You don't have to worry. This matter has passed for a long time, and no one mentioned it. Probably no one can remember the name Jacques d'Arc." Mr. Jacques sighed slowly at this time, then smiled and said, "So, Baron York, I actually don't know what you're talking about. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 2/4. Chapter 2088. Baron York and his entourage did not stay in Mr. Jacques' house. Instead, they quickly left. Mr. Jacques still led the Baron and his entourage to the door solemnly. I will stay here for a few days. Before leaving, Baron York looked at Mr. Jacques meaningfully and said, although the royal document is urgent, considering the actual journey, it is impossible to bring you to Sinan so quickly. So, please consider my suggestion. Lord Baron, you can enjoy the peace here for a few days, Mr. Jacques replied with a smile. You will like the simplicity here. As for what the two of them discussed in the reception room, the servants naturally had no way of knowing. But from the looks of it, they seemed to be having a good conversation. I hope so. Baron York mounted his horse and headed to the village under the escort of a group of cavalrymen. He planned to find the village chief, Mayor Charles, and ask him to arrange a place to stay. It was said that this was the only place in the area controlled by the Burgundians that still adhered to the rule of the royal family. As nobles of the kingdom, they should be treated very well. Just as they left Mr. Jacques' house, a cavalryman came forward and asked, Lord, are we leaving just like that? About the document. Some things can't be rushed, Baron York said calmly. Although this place adheres to the tradition of the royal family's rule, it is surrounded by the territory of the Grand Duke of Burgundy. In the end, who knows if this place still adheres to the tradition of the royal family's rule? The cavalryman's expression froze. My lord, you mean that Domremy village is very likely already. But I heard from Jacques' servant that the village was just attacked by the Burgundian cavalrymen last night. All these years, the village has always been under attack. Of course, I hope that this is a place that supports the royal family. Baron York chuckled. Who doesn't think so? The cavalryman was puzzled. He did not know what the Baron meant. Baron York suddenly said, Speaking of servants, do you still remember the appearance of the little maid who barged in just now? The cavalryman had followed Baron York into the house and had been by his side the whole time. He naturally knew that a rash little maid had barged in during the conversation between the Baron and Mr. Jacques. I didn't pay much attention to it, the cavalryman recalled and said. That maid kept her head down. After being scolded by Jacques, she covered her face and left in tears. Sir, is there anything wrong with this maid? Baron York said thoughtfully, I wonder how old the young lady of the Jacques family is this year. That's easy. The cavalryman smiled and said, As long as we enter the village, we can ask around. While we're at it, we can also ask about this reckless maid. She might have heard something she shouldn't have. The Baron nodded and yawned. I hope there's a soft enough bed here. It's not easy to crawl out of a woman's belly in the middle of the night and run here exhausted. It was indeed not easy. For a noble who lived like a prince, this kind of high-intensity journey would take away half of his life. However, this Baron was no ordinary noble. He had been promoted because of his military exploits. I'll go to the village to make arrangements first. As the cavalryman spoke, he spurred his horse and took the lead to leave the main group, heading towards the village. Is this all you found? Mr. Jacques sat in the study at home, looking at a set of maid's clothes on the table. In front of him, there was a woman in her 30s. She was also a maid in the family, but also an elder responsible for taking care of Mississippi. Yes. The maid lowered her head and said, I found it in the utility room in the backyard. As for Miss, I don't know where she went for the time being. Nonsense. Mr. Jacques sighed. I'll call some people to look for her. Miss may have gone to the hunter's cabin that she often goes to. No need. Mr. Jacques waved his hand. You don't have to worry about this matter. Just deal with the family affairs first. The maid nodded. In fact, although she was a maid, because she had stayed in this family for a long time, she could almost be regarded as half a housekeeper. There was no housekeeper here. Sir, what about the reception of those foreign guests? Mr. Jacques rubbed his eyebrows. Where are they now? The maid said, I'm afraid that they may not be suitable here, so I asked Bertrand to take them to visit the nearby farm. Now, they should be at the farm. Or, I'll go and find them now. Well done. Mr. Jacques nodded and immediately said, Don't rush to find them. That's all. I also need some time to think about something. You go out first. I'll call you if there's anything. Yes, Master Jacques. After the maid left the study, Mr. Jacques leaned back in the chair. He closed his eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking. After a while, Mr. Jacques stood up and walked to the bookcase. He put his hand into a certain layer of the bookcase, as if he was looking for something. Then a click was heard, which was the sound of some kind of mechanism. Then one of the compartments of the bookcase suddenly popped up, and there was a small secret door, a secret compartment. Mr. Jacques took a deep breath and quickly took off a ring on his left hand and put it into the secret compartment. He quickly recovered and sat down in front of the desk. He muttered to himself, "No matter who comes, I won't let you take her away." He seemed to have made some kind of decision in his heart, and his eyes gradually focused. The scenery of the farm was really good. There were almost no farms of this scale in the Free City. In fact, this farm was really not small. "Everyone, do you want to go to the windmill to have a look?" The tour guide, Bertrand, pointed at the windmill. "You can see the entire Domremy village from there. The windmill is the best place to see it." Essex wasn't very interested. He was worried about the condition of Ludic and the male assistant. Although the two of them were settled, Mr. Jacques was receiving the Baron, so he didn't have time to find Doctor. Insert a perfect copy of the old version of the Book Chaser app. Source changeable artifact. When can we go back? We can't possibly stay here forever just because those cavalrymen don't leave, right? Arthaces asked bluntly. This doesn't seem to be the way to treat guests. Bertrand pretended not to hear him. "If you don't want to go up, there is a small river nearby with a lot of fish. We can go fishing." Mr. Essex rolled his eyes and said directly, "I'll go up and see the scenery." As the maid of the mansion, Lily naturally had to follow them. The main reason was that she instinctively didn't want to stay with Boss Luo and the others. "We want to walk around nearby," Boss Luo suddenly said. "It won't be too far, just near the windmill." Bertrand was a bit surprised, but he still nodded. There was a door on the windmill, so he needed to go up and open the door to let Mr. Essex see the scenery. Obviously, it would take some time to climb up. "That works." Bertrand thought for a while and said, "If there is anything, please call me. I can hear you." This was the range of the farm, so there was no danger, so Bertrand didn't make it difficult. Seeing that the three had walked into the windmill, Miss Maid suddenly looked at Nan Xiaonan and handed her a few pieces of paper. "What is this?" Nan Xiaonan looked at the contents of the paper curiously. It turned out to be a few drawings of hand-drawn plants, and it was a super realistic style. There should be these plants around the village. Miss Maid said casually, "Lady Nan, please search according to the reference on the paper and try to collect more than 3 of each plant. I want to make some potions. It's used to deal with Ludic's symptoms." Nan Xiaonan's heart skipped a beat. "Lady Nan, if you can't collect them before sunset, you can come back tomorrow." Miss Maid smiled slightly. "Damn, doesn't that mean I don't want to come back tonight? Why don't you just say it? It's dangerous for a girl to spend the night outside alone." "Okay, I'll try to come back before tomorrow morning." Nan Xiaonan patted her chest and promised. As for why Miss Maid was sure that there were these plants around the village, she didn't dare to ask. She just needed to come back before next week. What should she do? After Nan Xiaonan left, Boss Luo pointed to a grassy slope facing the windmill. "Go there and walk. Maybe you'll get something." The girl liked lying on the grass. At this time, the sky and the earth seemed to be integrated with her. She would get peace at this time, but she wasn't at peace at this time. She heard part of the conversation between her father and Baron York. She couldn't get rid of this part from her mind. The girl understood her father's meaning at that time, so she covered her face and left. She knew that her father didn't want those cavalrymen from the kingdom to recognize her. Did they come here for me? The absent-minded girl didn't notice something else. Next to the grass she was lying on, something was sneakily poking its head out from the grass. There was a small patch of grass on top of its head, like a seed emerging from the soil. It was a chubby and cute face. The small figure was lying on the ground, slowly approaching the girl. To be exact, it was approaching the stone sword that the girl put on the grass. Sword of Victory. She was going to get it. She finally got it. Her small hand had touched the hilt of Sword of Victory, and this time, she thought of a way to pick it up successfully. The girl didn't notice it at all, but the sudden sound of a person's voice woke the girl up instantly. She sat up. Seeing this, the little figure, who was about to succeed, jumped in fright. She also burrowed into the bushes in an instant. She was also extremely angry. "It's you." The girl's voice was pleasantly surprised and then turned cold. "You guys." She looked at the direction where the voice came from. Boss Luo and Miss Maid were walking slowly at this time, as if they were on a walk. The girl couldn't move her eyes away from these two people. She suddenly felt that when they stood together, they could actually make everything seem like an extra part. "Father told me to receive you," the girl said calmly. "Why don't you stay at my house?" "What are you doing here?" Boss Luo said, "We left in a hurry last night and didn't have time to see the scenery around. So we took this opportunity. Mr. Bertrand took Mr. Assake's and others to the windmill to enjoy the scenery. Do you need me to call him over?" "I see Bertrand every day. Why should I call him over?" The girl shook her head and suddenly said, "The scenery here is really good. I won't disturb you. I'll go back first." Boss Luo said, "Miss Rana seems to have something on her mind." "Even if there's something on my mind, it's a girl's matter." The girl said indifferently, "It's not a gentleman's behavior to casually inquire into a girl's mind." Miss Maid then smiled faintly. "Miss Rana, you seem to have something on your mind." The girl stared at these two guys in a daze. These two people were simply invincible together. The girl rolled her eyes. She simply sat on the grass again, looking at the river below the grassy slope, even grabbing a stone and throwing it into the water. "Don't. What do you think the river will eventually flow to?" the girl asked suddenly. Miss Maid said indifferently, "The river will eventually flow into the ocean, or it will be cut off midway and disappear." The girl, Jean, scratched her head. "That's not romantic at all. You look just like one of my former tutors. You're as old-fashioned as a piece of rotten wood." Miss Maid smiled casually and wasn't annoyed. "Miss Rana, where do you think the river will eventually flow to?" The girl thought for a while and said, "It will meet the other half of its fate somewhere on the horizon. They will be entangled together and then flow to the distant, unknown future together. As long as there are people, they will flow to the place where people are. They will witness everything, everything. People will sing of their companionship. For eternity." Miss Maid finally heaved a sigh of relief. Once again, she felt like she was being executed. In the end, they will still flow into the ocean or disappear midway due to insufficient water. Miss Maid said again. So the girl stared at Miss Maid fiercely and was about to speak. "Miss Rana, you're really here." It was Mr. Jacques' voice. Mr. Jacques' voice came from afar. He was now climbing on the grass, smiling towards them. He saw Boss Luo, the brave young man he admired. "You're also here, brave young man." Mr. Jacques smiled with relief. "Luo, welcome back safe and sound, my savior." Boss Luo said casually, "I'm just saving myself." Mr. Jacques said, "No matter what, my promise won't change. It just so happens that all of you are here. Luo, why don't we talk about your marriage with my daughter now?" Miss Maid's eyes narrowed slightly. The girl's mouth was slightly open. "What is father doing?" As for Boss Luo blinked his eyes and then stepped on the grass somewhere inadvertently. Squeak! They suddenly heard a strange sound. "What's that sound?" "Maybe it's the mice in the field." Boss Luo smiled casually and said, "There are many mosquitoes here. Why don't we go and meet Mr. Bertrand first? By the way, Mr. Jacques, is lunch ready? I think my companions and I should be hungry. Let's decide." The girl quickly picked up Sword of Victory on the ground. "I'll call Bertrand." Chapter 2089. Although the girl ran to the windmill with the excuse of looking for Bertrand, Mr. Jacques, who was left behind, did not stop there. Mr. Jacques seemed to be quite enthusiastic about this matter and anxious. "Luo, brave Luo, do you think my daughter is still too young?" Mr. Jacques said directly, "Although my daughter looks a little childish, according to local customs, she can be married. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry. You can wait for a year or two, and you'll be surprised." "I'm not in a hurry," Boss Luo blinked. He thought for a while and said, "Mr. Jacques, I don't deny that I have very special feelings for Miss Jean, but Mr. Jacques seems to be a little anxious. Is this matter related to the cavalry from the kingdom?" Mr. Jacques could not help but sigh. "You are not only a brave person, but also a sensitive person." Boss Luo said, "What happened? Is it unsolvable?" Mr. Jacques took a deep breath and said, "If possible, even if you don't get married immediately, I hope you can get engaged with Jean first, and then I hope you can take Jean away from here as soon as possible." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "So, the purpose of the cavalry is to take Miss Jean away? Is it related to the miracle she showed?" Mr. Jacques was shocked. "You are really a scary person." He had never seen such a calm young man. Not only was he calm, but more importantly, he had a terrifying analytical ability. Boss Luo shook his head, looked at Mr. Jacques and said softly, "Mr. Jacques, I'm actually not scary. What's scary is that I'm seen as scary." He wasn't scary. What was scary was the fact that he was seen as scary. This was a very strange way of saying it, and Mr. Jacques could not help but feel puzzled. But at this time, he did not want to think too much. Intuitively, he had recognized that this brave young man was someone he could trust. Mr. Jacques took a deep breath at this time. This matter is indeed related to Baron York, and it will also involve the royal family of the kingdom. Please forgive me for not being able to confess more things. Forgive me for my stubbornness, because you're the only person I can think of who has the ability to take Jenna away and protect her. I'm afraid Miss Rana doesn't need anyone to protect her. Boss Luo said casually, "She has the ability to create miracles. If possible, I don't want her to continue using God's miracle." Mr. Jacques sighed. "I just want her to live a happy life. I don't want her to bear too many things. Those things are too heavy for her shoulders." "Do you really think so, Mr. Jacques?" Miss Maid asked abruptly, as a parent. Mr. Jacques looked at the beautiful woman beside Boss Luo in surprise. He had always wanted to ask about their relationship because they seemed to be very close. "I'm not sure if other parents feel the same way." Mr. Jacques shook his head and said, "Maybe they want to see their children become the dazzling stars. But at least, I'd rather see her become the light in the ordinary people's homes under the night sky. What I hope is that Jenna is strong enough to support her future family. She is confident enough to illuminate the loved ones around her." "Mr. Jacques seems to be a good father," Miss Maid said in a low voice. Mr. Jacques shook his head. "If I'm a good father, I should always be by her side, instead of trying to take her away from me. Luo, please think about this matter carefully. You don't have to rush to promise me. But no matter what, I'll find a way to send Jenna away tonight. I hope you can appear." "I'll think about it." Boss Luo nodded gently. After a while, the girl had already returned with Bertrand, Mr. Asakes, and Kay Lily. Mr. Jacques didn't mention the engagement again. The girl knew that it was because there were too many people, so this topic was naturally not suitable to continue. But she began to consciously avoid Boss Luo's gaze. Why is he looking at me like this? Did he say anything to Father just now? Did he agree, or... The girl had many doubts in her heart. Until she returned to the mansion, she still couldn't get an answer. When she returned to the residence, the servant had already come up to say that lunch was ready. It was quite a sumptuous lunch. Mr. Jacques sat in the host's seat and greeted the guests in the house, as usual. "I remember that there should be another lady. Why haven't I seen her?" Mr. Jacques frowned. Mr. Asakes said, "Indeed, I just wanted to ask, why is Lady Nan missing?" Miss Maid said, "She seems to have left something in the mansion where she stayed before, so she wanted to retrieve it and left alone." "She went alone?" Mr. Jacques said in surprise. "Although it's daytime, it's still dangerous for a person to go through the forest alone. Besides, we're not sure if the Burgundian cavalry has been completely wiped out. If there are still 1 or 2 remnants hiding in the mansion, it's too rash." "Father, there are no more Burgundian cavalry in the mansion." The girl suddenly said at this time, "The cavalry that attacked this time was purified by me last night." Mr. Jacques acted as if he didn't hear the girl's answer. He thought for a while and said, "I'll ask Bertrand to bring 2 people to take a look later." "Mr. Jacques, you're too kind." Boss Luo smiled. He knew that looking for Nan Xiaonan was just an excuse. Mr. Jacques probably wanted Bertrand to bring people to explore the route in advance and prepare to leave. "This is what I should do. After all, you've helped our village a lot." Mr. Jacques nodded and immediately said, "I've already arranged for a doctor. The doctor should be able to arrive after lunch. Mr. Asakes, you can relax a little." Boss Asakes had nothing to say. He could only raise his glass in response. The atmosphere during the meal was quite pleasant. Everything was as usual. After the meal, Mr. Jacques used the excuse of taking a nap and went straight back to his room. The girl stayed behind and helped clean up the table with the servants. Miss Maid also took the initiative to help. Even the maid Kay or Lily came to help after hesitating for a while. He didn't expect this young lady of the farm to be so adept at household chores. But when he thought about how the girl could directly slaughter and marinate a big wild boar when she was in the hunter's hut, Mr. Assakes had nothing to say. Speaking of which, Miss Jean, why haven't I seen your mother? Kay or Lily, who was carrying the plates, also seemed to be at ease and asked curiously at this time. The girl said directly, "Mother is sick, so she tries not to leave the room. She can't be exposed to the wind, so even if she leaves the room, she has to wrap herself up. When I see her usually, I only talk to her through the door of the room." Kay or Lily widened her eyes and said, "Then you haven't seen your mother for a long time?" The girl nodded silently. Kay or Lily gossiped, "Then what's your mother's disease?" The girl was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Leprosy." Hearing the young girl talk about the illness of Mr. and Mrs. Jacques, Chris and Mr. Asashis couldn't help but slightly change their expressions. Although this illness could be easily cured in the Holy Light Kingdom, it was still an illness that could be easily cured. But considering the conditions here, it was seeing this, the girl said indifferently, "You don't have to worry. We have been dealing with it well. If there is really a problem, you won't see me now." Kay or Lily smiled embarrassedly, but lowered her head and stopped talking, gossiping. At this time, Miss Maid suddenly said, "When did Madam start to get sick?" The girl Jean glanced at Yu Yi in surprise. She didn't know why the maid asked this question. Maybe it was out of curiosity, or maybe it was for her master, because of the engagement. If the fiancé's mother was a leper, there was indeed something to consider. As a maid of the master, it was normal for her to have concerns. The girl was a little unhappy, but she didn't hide it. "At least 10 years, my father has been maintaining my mother's health with medicine. Maybe she doesn't want to live like this all the time." Boss Luo said, "That is to say, Miss Jean hasn't seen your mother for 10 years. How could it be?" The girl frowned and said, subconsciously, "I visit my mother every morning and before going to bed. Although I can't enter the door, we can still talk." "I'm afraid you don't remember your mother's appearance," Miss Maid said indifferently. The girl glared at the maid. "I'm talking to your master. What are you doing? I'll let you clean the toilet every day." At this time, the maid of the mansion came in and said the doctor had arrived. Mr. Assakes had been waiting for this doctor for a long time. Although Kay or Lily had hinted to him more than once that Miss Yu Yi had been studying the symptoms of Ludic in a male assistant. But he didn't dare to let this unknown woman do it. He still thought the doctor was more reliable. So when he heard the doctor came, he hurriedly took the doctor upstairs. It was an old man who was obviously a senior doctor. He was mature and steady, giving him a strong sense of security. Doctor, it's this way, not that way. You're going the wrong way." "Oh, really? Sorry, my eyesight is not very good. By the way, what did you say just now?" "I said, this way is the right way." "Oh, Ambole, what about you?" "This way, please." Mr. Assakes took a deep breath. He told himself not to worry and wait. Maybe this old doctor's medical skills were very good. After cleaning up the table, the girl suddenly found Boss Luo and expressed in front of Miss Maid that she hoped to talk to Boss Luo alone. I'll wait for you in the room. You can come over later," she said quickly. "Remember, just be alone." After saying that, the girl turned around and ran upstairs. Boss Luo couldn't help laughing. What a lively child. Miss Maid sighed. "Master, please don't laugh at me," Boss Luo said. "Then I'll go over later." Miss Maid thought for a while. "I'll find a chance to see Mrs. Isabel." Boss Luo said, "What do you think of?" Miss Maid shook her head. "I don't know yet. From now on, it's not something I'm familiar with." Boss Luo thought. In a bush, a figure was moving forward. Miss Nin even had a few weeds in her mouth at this time. There are also a lot of weeds in her hair. "As long as I can shing chuang once. That's too much. Pooh." Finally, Nan Xiaonan climbed out of the bush. She quickly spat out the weeds in her mouth, and then her eyes brightened. She took out the paper and compared it. Finally, she found one of the plants. But there was only one plant here. The task required at least 3 plants of each kind. She was so hungry. What kind of place was this? After picking the target plant, Nan Xiaonan began to look around. This was obviously a forest, but it was a relatively remote place. There were weeds all around, and the plants had many sharp thorns. Ordinary people wouldn't be willing to climb in here. If the blueprint didn't indicate that this plant usually grew in such an environment, she wouldn't have come all the way here. There were more mosquitoes. In addition to the 2 fixed bumps on her body, there were many more small red bumps on her body. She even wanted to take a bath, but when she took a step, she stepped on empty air. On the ground, there was a hole covered by weeds and withered leaves. Nan Xiaonan blinked her eyes, and her body instantly fell into the hole. She didn't even have time to curse. She still cursed out in the end, but the hole was too deep, and her voice couldn't travel out. In the mansion, the girl was busy. She was trying to find a bottle of perfume that her father brought back when he went to the city for business last year. At that time, she would rather her father brought her a dagger, which was more practical than perfume, so she didn't know where to put it. I can't find it. The girl helplessly sat on the carpet under the bed, resting her head on the edge of the bed. After returning to the room and taking off her coat, one of the straps of her underwear was crooked to her shoulder because of the exercise. That woman's body always smelled good, the girl muttered. Then she took a deep breath, picked up a glass of milk from the bedside table, and drank it in one gulp. Let's look for it again. The girl pulled herself together. Miss Joan, are you there? I'm coming. There was a knock on the door, and that guy's voice. The girl who was crawling under the bed suddenly raised her head, and then her head hit the bed. She didn't have time to feel the pain. She rubbed her head and hurriedly got up. Wait a minute. Don't come in. Okay, I'll wait for you outside, Miss Joan. The girl breathed a sigh of relief, looked at herself, and hurriedly ran to the closet to find a set of clothes. Unexpectedly, her feet kicked the foot of the bed. At this time, she needed to take a deep breath and maintain a smile. Hashtag PS. As usual. Chapter 2090. Inside the City of Dawn. The statue of the Star of Dawn was located in the north of the City of Dawn. The Great Star of Dawn would release holy light even at night, making the night bright. This city was very similar to the City of Freedom in that it was also a huge capital with very advanced technology. In addition, the City of Dawn was also a capital that produced all kinds of sports. Every once in a while, new sports would appear in the City of Dawn, and they would quickly become popular in the 7 capitals of the Holy Light Kingdom. The Holy Light Kingdom sports meet that was held every 4 years was also held in the City of Dawn. Sports could stimulate people's passion and was a very good entertainment. The passion of the people for sports could also improve their physical fitness. This was a very good development direction, and there was nothing wrong with it. Even at night, the City of Dawn was still bright. There were stadiums of all sizes here, and all kinds of sports were being played. From ordinary ball games to speed events, and even boxing events, all of them existed in these stadiums of all sizes. At night, the City of Dawn was still bustling with people. They're too competitive. The white-clothed young man stood on the roof of a huge stadium and silently looked at the waves of passionate people in the stadium. Hearing this, Angel Lang hesitated and asked, "My lord, is there something wrong?" The white-robed young man said calmly, "Once a human has the desire to compete, many thoughts will also develop. The City of Dawn did a good job of focusing on the development of sports, but it seems that they have gone a little too far." Angel Lang said, "I think it's fine. This is the Holy Light Kingdom. Even though sports like sports have appeared, it only aroused the people's passion. It's not like the subworlds outside where the greedy humans would use this as an excuse to create evil gambling." The white-clothed young man pointed at an advertisement on a huge screen in the stadium and said calmly, "A quiz with prizes. Can it be considered a prototype of gambling?" Angel Lang was stunned and didn't know what to say. The City of Dawn was still the City of the Star of Dawn in name, but the Star of Dawn was no longer around. Therefore, The City of Dawn was under the supervision of the other 6 capitals. However, the other 6 people, including the white-clothed young man, would not directly appear. They would only monitor from behind the scenes and would only take action to correct mistakes. Most of the time, the president of the City of Dawn was in charge of the city. Although it's a little lively, Langdo thought for a moment and said, but every time, the City of Dawn still provides the most prayers. This is enough to prove the purity of the City of Dawn. It seems that the president has done an excellent job of balancing the situation. He has fully mobilized the enthusiasm of the residents, but he hasn't let the people become too addicted. The young man in white didn't say anything. He looked at the huge statue in the north and thought for a moment before saying, after we find out about the medicine, you can stay here and check the number of people in the Dawn City. I understand, my lord. Rondo nodded. The young man in white suddenly covered his chest and took a deep breath. Sir, did something happen? Rondo was slightly surprised. The young man in white shook his head and said, it's nothing. Perhaps the mark of the Holy Mother has begun to take effect. I feel that my breathing has become smoother. That's good. Rondo let out a sigh of relief. The young man in white was thinking. He did feel very comfortable at the moment. He even felt lazy, as if he was bathing in the sun. The power of the nagging guy in the monastery seemed to be too effective. My lord, it should be that person. In the midst of the hubbub of voices, Langdo suddenly pointed his finger. He pointed at a box in the stadium's viewing platform below. In the box, a chubby middle-aged man was waving his hands and cheering for the athlete he supported. This was the target of this trip, the businessman who produced the illegal drugs. There was a motorcycle racing event going on below. This man was a fanatic of this event. The young man in white narrowed his eyes slightly, and the distance between them was instantly shortened. He could clearly see everything in the box. He saw that the man was not only celebrating, but his expression was also strange. It was almost fanatical. On the table next to the middle-aged man, there was a box full of red and white capsules. In the middle of the celebration, the middle-aged man grabbed a handful of capsules from a box and stuffed them into his mouth from time to time. And at this moment, he was in a state where he wasn't praying with all his heart, but he was strangely producing a strong wish power, it seems. The young man in white frowned. I haven't been to the City of Dawn for too long. Rondo saw the young man in white snort and then step out. In the next moment, the young man in white was already in the box, standing behind the middle-aged man. Rondo was shocked because he felt a trace of anger from the young man in white. He didn't dare to be careless and quickly chased after the young man in white. He couldn't go directly like the young man in white, but he wasn't slow either. Soon, he arrived at the box. When Rondo arrived, the fanatic man in the box had been taken out of the Destiny Diary. The man fell on the chair, motionless. The young man in white was reading the man's Destiny Diary. Suddenly, the young man in white threw the Destiny Diary at the man. My lord, what's this? It's the same as the previous 2 guys, the young man in white said in a deep voice. His diary has been changed. But Rondo looked at the box on the table. There were many capsules inside. He eats them like vitamins. The young man in white snorted coldly. He eats them all the time, but he doesn't know why his body needs so many vitamins. Rondo said with a serious expression, only the 7 capitals have the authority to change the Destiny Diary. Even the president of the City of Dawn doesn't have this power. Now, only the Holy Mother and the Saint exist in the Holy Light Kingdom. If the diary needs to be changed, it can only be one of them. It can't be the one in the City of Freedom, the young man in white said coldly. Rondo was stunned. Although he didn't know why the young man in white was so certain, he believed him unconditionally. That was why Rondo's expression changed drastically. It's the Holy Mother? It can't be her either. The young man in white shook his head and said, it can't be her. It can't be these 2. Rondo opened his mouth. Then it can only be the other capitals. But they aren't in the Holy Light Kingdom right now. Could it be that this happened even earlier? Rondo couldn't be sure of something. After all, the young man in white had been fighting in the Void Dimension and had just returned. While he was fighting, the few people with the highest authority in the Holy Light Kingdom could have made a move, It seems that the trail is broken for now. The young man in white thought for a moment and said, he's the manufacturer, the source of the illegal drugs. Since we can't find a source here, I'm afraid there's only one way left. What is it? Rondo asked subconsciously. The young man in white said, we can only find a way to enter the system's back end and check the change diary data. You want to find the developers of the Destiny system? Rondo's expression changed. He didn't know which developer the young man in white was going to find next. In his impression, the young man in white wasn't close to the developers. Take my mark and find the president of the City of Dawn. He'll be in charge of the review. The young man in white suddenly said, after the review, return to the City of Freedom and meet with Grabe. Wait. It seemed that the young man in white was going to find one of the developers of the Destiny system alone. Rondo nodded and accepted the mark given by the young man in white. When he looked up again, the young man in white was nowhere to be seen. It will take some time for the merchant who produces Lang not to wake up. Langdo glanced at the box that was at least 70% full and suddenly frowned. He picked up one of the capsules and observed it. He wanted to find out the origin of this thing. Perhaps there was another way. Rondo suddenly threw the capsule into his mouth. As a high-level angel, he was immune to all poisons. He had enough confidence. However, the capsule gradually melted in his mouth and finally disappeared. Rondo felt like he didn't swallow anything. The feeling disappeared just like that. Langdo checked his body and mental state, but found no changes. Could it be that this illegal drug is only effective on humans in the Holy Light Kingdom? Rondo shook his head and put away the box with the capsules. He didn't want to stay in the City of Dawn for too long. It was better for him to find the president and return to the City of Freedom to meet with Grabe. Sorry to keep you waiting. The door of the room slowly opened. The girl was wearing a light yellow dress. Her hair seemed to have been tidied up, but this time, the girl didn't wear her usual long hair wig. Ms. Rondo, are you not feeling well? Boss Luo said with a smile. I see that you have trouble walking. No, the girl answered. Then, she pointed at the room. Don't just stand there. Come in. Or are you afraid of walking into a ladies' room? Boss Luo certainly wouldn't fall for such a shallow provocation. Then, he smiled and walked into the room. Or rather, the girl's room. Seeing Boss Luo walk in, the girl took a deep breath. She stuck her head out of the door and looked at both sides of the corridor. Then, she gently closed the door and locked it. With her hands clasped behind her back, she leaned against the door and looked at Boss Luo. Do you want something to drink? I got some fresh milk here. It tastes pretty good. So saying, she walked over to the table. My toes hurt. The girl maintained her smile and the posture that was always praised by the tutors, but it still hurt. Ms. Rondo's room is interesting. What? Do you think I have weapons, hammers, bows, swords, and armor hanging here? The girl blinked and said, the only thing that could be considered a weapon was the stone Sword of Victory. Sword of Victory was placed on the dressing table near the window. Boss Luo casually walked to the window and closed it. Then, he looked at the girl and smiled. The wind is a bit strong. Be careful not to catch a cold. Oh, thank you, the girl said softly. Her clothes were a bit thin, but the room wasn't like opening the window. The ventilation would be better. He closed the window. Was he trying to do something? He was too proactive. I wasn't prepared. Boss Luo's next move made the girl even more confused. Not only did he close the window, he even pulled the curtains. Although it didn't make the room too dark, it made it a bit darker. If he does anything, I'll teach him a lesson, the girl thought to herself. Outside the window, a small figure was puffing up his cheeks and waving his fists in the air. He seemed to be extremely angry. Seeing that Boss Luo didn't move for a long time, the girl was a bit nervous and didn't take the initiative to speak. The atmosphere was a bit too quiet. Ms. Rondo. Boss Luo suddenly called the girl's name. Wait, I'll prepare. The girl's heart was racing and her scalp was numb. Is there anything else you need to prepare? Boss Luo blinked. Of course, I need to prepare some things. The girl's fingers twisted the corner of her skirt and looked at the floor. If I don't prepare, how can I at least find some sausage or something? Her voice became softer and softer, and finally, it was like a needle falling. Boss Luo acted as if he didn't hear it. He picked up Sword of Victory from the dressing table. I want to say, Ms. Rondo, don't you want to have a scabbard? It's not convenient to keep holding it like this. Sword, scabbard? The girl widened her eyes and blushed. Scabbard. Yes, you reminded me. I didn't need a scabbard. I'll find a blacksmith in the village to make one. He didn't hear it clearly just now? That must be it. Outside the window, the little girl's face was pressed against the window. Through the hazy curtains, she tried hard to distinguish what was happening in the room. Suddenly, the little figure's eyes widened in disbelief. She seemed to be saying, how did this guy pick up the sword directly? She didn't believe it, so she pressed her face against the window again and widened her eyes. But at this moment, she heard a buzzing sound. The little girl turned around impatiently and waved her hand, trying to drive away the strange sound that disturbed her. It would have been better if she hadn't seen it. Once she saw it, she was startled. She screamed and flew away desperately. She saw a giant hornet chasing after her. What's that sound? The girl was startled. Boss Luo smiled casually. Maybe it's a mouse. The girl nodded and remembered that she was bitten for no reason. Well, it seems like there are more mice. I'll ask the servants to catch them later. Ms. Rondo, why did you ask me to come here? Boss Luo stood beside the window to block the hazy light and asked the young girl. Boss Luo casually put the Sword of Victory in the direction of the window. The girl opened her mouth and stopped talking. In the end, she slowly exhaled and took a deep breath. Then, she said seriously, after marriage, I don't want to have a child so soon. But don't worry, I'll fulfill my duties as a wife. Boss Luo blinked. He felt that women in this era were very independent. Hashtag PS. 3/4. Chapter 2091. The door of the room was specially made. There was a square opening in the door, which was big enough for the plate to pass through. The servant of Mr. Jacques' house was sending food into the room through the opening in the door. In this way, the servant wouldn't have any contact with the people in the room. Madam, lunch is here. I made a delicious stew today. Please eat more. I'll come back for dinner. The servant knocked on the door and left immediately after saying that. It seemed that he didn't want to stay any longer. After the servant left, the door of another room in the corridor opened slowly. Miss Maid walked out of the room with no expression on her face. She came to the door. This was the room of Madame Isabelle, Mr. Jacques' wife. In this era, there was almost no way to treat this disease. The best way was to isolate it, and in some places, they would even kill it directly to avoid becoming the source of infection. Miss Maid stood outside the door, listening to the movement in the room, but there was no movement in the room. She put her hand on the door handle casually. You're in the wrong room. At this time, Mr. Jacques' voice sounded behind her. Miss Maid suddenly stopped. She turned around as if nothing had happened and smiled. I'm a little curious, Mr. Jacques said indifferently. I'm very happy that guests are willing to visit my house. If Missy is interested, I can show you around, but only outside this room. I heard from Miss Jean that your wife is sick. Miss Maid said softly. It's not a secret. Mr. Jacques shook his head, but people don't want to talk about it, probably because I have a farm and provide them with a lot of work. Miss Maid suddenly said, in my hometown, there's a pharmacy that can cure this disease. Mr. Jacques, do you want to try it? Mr. Jacques obviously didn't expect that this beautiful woman would give such an answer. He didn't know how to respond and was stunned on the spot. Miss Maid said further, Mr. Jacques, don't you want your wife to be well? I think, as a patient, there's no more urgent wish than to recover. Mr. Jacques took a deep breath. I thank you on behalf of Isabelle. It's just that over the years, we have tried many methods. Isabelle went through a lot of pain. Miss Maid asked, is Mr. Jacques going to give up? Mr. Jacques shook his head. I don't want to give up, but I don't dare to try it either. As I said, we have tried many ways, but in the end, there was no result. The pain made my wife's mood very unstable. She doesn't want to see people, and even I can't get close to her. My prescription is definitely effective, Wang Yao said. The servant girl said again, if you can't cure your wife, I'm willing to be infected with her. Mr. Jacques opened his mouth in surprise. What a touching promise. Miss Yi, even I'm tempted. But Mr. Jacques doesn't seem too optimistic about curing his wife. Miss Maid narrowed her eyes. Mr. Jacques was silent for a while, and then slowly said, maybe we've all been used to this state, letting hope always exist in the illusion. We won't and dare not break this fragile and endless hope easily. I can, Miss Maid said seriously. This was the third time she expressed her opinion. Mr. Jacques was slightly moved. He even pondered. Maybe he had made up his mind. Mr. Jacques sighed and said, I'll find a way to calm my wife's mood and let her try again. Please give me some time. You really need to be patient with patience, Miss Maid said with a smile. Please wait for a moment. With that, Mr. Jacques took out a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. Before entering, Mr. Jacques said softly, Isabel, I'm coming in. I have something to tell you. At this moment, Miss Maid suddenly asked, Mr. Jacques, do you really believe me? Mr. Jacques didn't think too much, but said directly, It's hard for me to believe a stranger. But I believe your master. He has a pair of clear eyes. In fact, I know how to observe a person's eyes very well. Miss Maid said, What do you think of my eyes, Mr. Jacques? Very beautiful as a gem. Mr. Jacques smiled casually. They're the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. Just beautiful? I think beautiful is the best compliment for a lady. Mr. Jacques smiled. Forgive my ignorance, but I really can't find a more suitable word than beautiful. I'll wait for your news here, Mr. Jacques. Miss Maid stepped back 2 small steps. Finally, before entering the door, Mr. Jacques suddenly asked, Is it Luo's idea to treat my wife? It's my personal idea, Miss Maid said calmly, but it's also my duty to solve problems for my master. Luo, he is a very good servant. Mr. Jacques nodded and took a deep look at Miss Maid. The door opened a little. Mr. Jacques walked into the room carefully and then closed the door again. Miss Maid could hear Mr. Jacques calling his wife's name through the door. Isabel, forgive me for bothering you at this time. Only Mr. Jacques' voice could be heard. At this time, Miss Maid stretched out her finger. At the tip of her finger, a small black butterfly slowly flew out. The butterfly flew to the door and disappeared instantly. The black butterfly had flown into the door. The room was very spacious, without any extra furnishings. There was only a very large bed. The 4 sides of the bed were covered with gauze curtains. Mr. Jacques was standing beside the bed, talking through the gauze curtains. The black butterfly quietly docked at the side. Vaguely, a figure could be seen sitting inside the gauze curtains. At this time, Mr. Jacques was whispering something. It was not about the treatment. I'm going to send Jean away tonight. I know you'll agree with me. Isabel. Mr. Jacques sighed. You don't say anything, so I'll take it as you agree. Miss Maid didn't wait too long outside the door. Mr. Jacques had already walked out of the room. I hope I can hear good news, Miss Maid said with a smile. I hope I can also hear good news from you, Miss Yi. Mr. Jacques nodded. My wife agreed, but she's a little emotional. I want to wait for her to calm down before starting the treatment. Also, I think that since you want to treat him, you will need some time to prepare. If you need anything, just tell the servants at home. I will tell them. Then what time do you think is suitable, Mr. Jacques? Mr. Jacques thought for a while. Maybe it'll be better in the evening. What do you think? Yes, sir. Miss Maid nodded. Then I'll go back and prepare some necessary supplies. Wait, I hope you won't tell Jean about this for the time being. Mr. Jacques suddenly said, It'll be a suitable time to wait until the good news comes out. Of course. Mr. Jacques said, Today may be a good day. At least it's better than I thought. You go back first. I still want to accompany my wife. Then, I'll leave first. The so-called duties of a wife were actually many, but the girl's behavior at this time was probably referring to some aspects. The girl had always been a bold person. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to hunt alone in the forest, and even more impossible for her to go deep into the dangerous underground river. She often used the water of the underground river to travel back and forth. These deeds, for an ordinary 14 or 15-year-old teenager, were probably behaviors that only existed in the illusion. She was really bold. After saying those words that were like a declaration, she even cooperated with the action. Her soft body suddenly threw herself into the arms of Boss Luo. Panic, fear, and even some excitement. The yearning for men and the restlessness of adolescence mixed with some unclear thoughts of a young girl. Under all kinds of stimulation, the girl's heart was beating fast. This was an age where it was easy to be impulsive, even reckless. She tightly hugged Luacio's body, buried her head in his arms. "I want to join the army. I don't want to be bound by marriage for my whole life. Please forgive me for my stubbornness. This is the best way. Please let me leave your side for a while. For this, I will offer my body and loyalty to you. This is the biggest promise I can give you. With my purity." Her heart was beating more violently. Perhaps these were not the words she really wanted to say, but these were the words she could think of that could express her will clearly. "Miss Jenna, don't you think this is a bit hasty?" Boss Luo asked softly. The girl shook her head and said faintly, "Father may want to send me away. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in a hurry to let me marry you. Something happened today. Father never thought that he would say those harsh words to me like today. Although my heart is very uncomfortable, I can vaguely feel the meaning of his words." Boss Luo listened calmly. The girl raised her head and said, "If I don't go with you, there is a high probability that I will be taken away by Bertrand. He might send me to another place and lock me up temporarily. That way I won't be free, but I can be free from you." Boss Luo said indifferently, "How do you know that I will let you go, Miss Jenna? So I will make you believe that I will remain loyal to you." The girl said solemnly, "My loyalty to love will be as firm as my belief in God's miracle. I know that I have a mission that I must complete. I can only choose this way to make my family feel at ease. Most importantly, I don't hate you." "What is your mission?" Boss Luo suddenly asked. The girl said, "I will drive away the brutal Burgundians and finally defeat the British Empire behind the Burgundians and let the wind of freedom blow on the land of France." "You look forward to it?" "I look forward to the arrival of this day, because this is the meaning of my existence, my destiny. The revelation of God's miracle." "You were there at that time, weren't you?" The girl's eyes were hazy. "It was you, the witness. I pulled out the sword of victory. You are my first witness. There is no one more suitable than you. Also, we have a marriage contract. This must be St. Michael's arrangement." Boss Luo said indifferently, "If I say that I don't want to see this as an arrangement, and I don't want to admit that this is St. Michael's will, I might even hate St. Michael, would you still insist?" "Be careful with your words." A trace of panic appeared in the girl's eyes. She even subconsciously looked at the sword of victory and hurriedly said, "When I pray, I will add your name. I will look forward to St. Michael's arrival to talk to me." Boss Luo smiled casually. The girl opened her mouth. This guy really... However, things like faith couldn't be forced. Not everyone in the outside world had faith. The girl had always thought that faith was something that depended on one's own freedom. If one had faith, one would have it. And if one didn't have it, one couldn't force it. Faith should be a spirit that allowed people to live and work hard, not a tool to rule. She took a deep breath. At this moment, she was still hugging the other person's body tightly. Her thin clothes couldn't completely block the skin contact between their bodies. Will you agree?" the girl asked in a low voice. "I know my request is unreasonable, but please give me a few years. Since you have the habit of keeping maids, even when I'm not here, you can." Even Boss Luo himself didn't know when he had the habit of keeping maids as his pets. He shook his head and gently pressed on the girl's shoulders, pushing her away from his embrace. "You guessed one thing right. Your father doesn't intend to let me take you away, and I'm afraid it will happen in the next 1 or 2 days. You agree?" the girl asked in surprise. "I didn't agree," Boss Luo said indifferently, "but I didn't refuse either. I think I should agree." Then, the girl suddenly blushed. She lowered her head subconsciously, then pulled Boss Luo's clothes and said in a low voice, Wait, can you do it outside? I heard that if you do it inside, there will be a child. I mean, after I defeat Britain, I will definitely give you a child." Boss Luo took a step forward at this time. The girl was like a frightened rabbit, slowly taking a step back. Luocio took a step forward, and the girl subconsciously took another step back. Finally, she was forced to the bedside and sat down. She lowered her head, bit her lips, and clenched the clothes around her waist. I'm ready. Boss Luo bent down, but he picked up the bedsheet and wrapped it around the girl's body. The girl was stunned. She looked up in surprise, and her eyes widened. It's too early for you. Boss Luo smiled. You? The girl's face turned pale. Do you think I'm still young? Boss Luo put two fingers together, gently tapped the girl's forehead, and chuckled. Read less books for adults. I'm going to find your father. Chapter 2092. The passage was very long. Nan Xiaonan's buttocks suffered a strong impact, and it was very sore. She groaned, her face tightened, and she grimaced. She didn't want to speak, only the sound of her breath. Finally, she lay on the ground like mud. After a while, Lady Nan got up tiredly and rubbed the place where she was hit. She only felt that her bones were scattered and then put back together again. It was said that the Black Soul envoys had their own exclusive body, and it could even be customized according to the requirements. The body of the Black Soul envoys could be immune to many attacks and had many functions, but she didn't. She really didn't. On the one hand, she didn't have time. On the other hand, Miss Maid said that the materials for customizing the Black Soul envoys were currently in short supply, and the person in charge of getting materials in the shop was currently on duty at another post and couldn't come out for the time being. So Lady Nan still used her original body, the ordinary body of a real human, Nan Xiaonan. Nan Xiaonan didn't know whether the stock of materials was really not enough, but she knew that she was stopped by an unscrupulous leader. Living with a smile, JPG Shi didn't want to think about things like, as long as I can create a star once. After getting up, Nan Xiaonan looked at the passage where she fell. She wanted to climb up, but she couldn't. She could only explore forward to see if there was another way. According to Miss Maid, there was a huge underground river underground in this area. Nan Xiaonan estimated the depth of her fall. Maybe she was not far from the underground river, and she might even be in the area of the underground river. It was just that she didn't hear the sound of water, but the humidity of the surrounding air was not small. Then the question was, where do the materials of the Black Soul envoys come from? Can this thing be made? Can I make the materials myself? Can I make myself? Go back and ask. When she was thinking about it, some strange sounds came from the complicated underground world. Lady Nan, who was not very brave, immediately followed the unbeatable sutra of Shun and walked in the opposite direction. She had encountered enough trouble. If she was around the boss, she could still have some fun. But now, she had to stay as far away from the trouble as possible. In this strange world, there were superpowers. It hadn't been long since the story of a young girl annihilating the cavalry with a single slash of her 40-meter greatsword. But the strange sound came from another direction. Lady Nan frowned, turned around again, and walked away quickly. The strange sound came from the direction she was heading, and she turned around again. She couldn't even remember how many times she had turned her head, but that strange voice always came from in front of her, as if it wanted her to find out what was going on, so it persevered. I'm not leaving. At this moment, Miss Witch of the Academies sat on the ground, crossed her arms, and glared. If you have the ability, come out and have fun. After an unknown amount of time, an indifferent shadow quietly appeared behind Nan Xiaonan and slowly floated over. As if she didn't know, she continued to look around with her eyes wide open. The shadow was getting closer and closer. In the darkness, it slowly stretched out its bloodless hands to Nan Xiaonan. It was getting closer. Maybe in the next moment, this pair of pale hands would choke her. At this moment, she suddenly turned her head, and then a sharp weapon came out from her hand, chopping at the pair of pale hands, the kitchen knife of Rose Mansion. It was just an ordinary kitchen knife without Xing Chuang. But this was Nan Xiaonan's most powerful counterattack at this moment. However, she didn't expect that the kitchen knife could easily chop off the pale hands, but it didn't feel real. It seemed that what she chopped was just an illusion without a real body. Nan Xiaonan focused her eyes, and the pale hands in front of her suddenly stretched out and choked her neck in an instant. The feeling of suffocation filled her eyes, and Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but feel shocked. At this moment, it had a real body. A cold and gloomy energy circulated in Nan Xiaonan's body, causing her entire body to exert strength. She was even grabbed by the neck and slowly lifted up. Nan Xiaonan painfully kicked her legs and struggled, but it was futile. She tried to pry the hands off her neck, but it didn't budge at all. In the darkness, Nan Xiaonan saw a figure with disheveled hair. Not only was the hair messy, it even fell to the ground. She couldn't see anymore. She was likely to die from suffocation or her throat being crushed. Nan Xiaonan didn't want to experience the experience of being resurrected in the Ark of the Covenant. As a somewhat famous Kingo in the dimensional void, she felt that she couldn't keep a low profile anymore. Spiritual explosion, soul attack. There was no other way. She couldn't use Xing Chuang, and her body was invaded by the cold energy. At this moment, she could only use this most violent and dangerous counterattack, detonating the spiritual power of her incomplete soul. Being weak for a period of time was better than staying in the Ark of the Covenant, not knowing when she would be resurrected. What if the boss suddenly became unhappy one day and turned off her light? In an instant, under the detonation of the spiritual power turned into a huge storm and swept up the owner of the pale hands. In that instant, Nan Xiaonan felt the pale hands loosening their grip on her neck. But soon, the speed of the spiritual explosion was far beyond her expectations. The spiritual storm didn't last long. In the darkness, a white flame appeared and completely dissipated. Nan Xiaonan's consciousness gradually faded. Nan Xiaonan's pupils shrank the instant the grayish-white flames appeared. In that instant, she was able to catch a glimpse of the face of the owner of the pale white hands. The shock in her heart could not be any greater. "Miss, Yi?" The pale hands let go of her at this moment. But Nan Xiaonan suddenly knelt on the ground, and her body slowly fell down. The surroundings became quiet again. Nan Xiaonan was lifted up by the hand and slowly dragged into the depths. "Mr. Asakes?" In the corridor, Boss Luo met Mr. Asakes, who was walking hurriedly. "You seem to be going somewhere." Mr. Asakes was carrying a cloth bag and seemed to be preparing to go out. Asakes said, "The doctor invited by Mr. Jacques has seen Ludic and the others." "Oh." Boss Luo asked curiously, "What did the doctor say?" Mr. Asakes said, "The doctor said that they were just frightened and lost their souls. They will be fine after taking some medicine to calm their emotions. Anyway, I can only believe it. But the ingredients for the medicine are still lacking, so I wanted to look for them directly. Anyway, we have nothing else to do here. I can't stay idle." Boss Luo didn't say anything, but just asked casually, "What ingredients do you need?" Boss Asakes took out a piece of crumpled paper, scratching his head. "Lizard's tail, frog's tongue, dead crab's shell, bat's feces, and sweet flower's root? By the way, do you know what sweet flower is? It should be a kind of plant that can be seen everywhere that can produce sugar." Boss Luo thought for a while. "Mr. Asakes, maybe you can pay attention to the bushes on the roadside. Maybe you can find it." "Okay, I'll pay more attention." Asakes nodded and immediately said, "I don't want to talk to you anymore. I'll go look for it before it gets dark. I'll find as much as I can. See you later. Be careful on the way." Boss Luo watched Mr. Asakes leave hurriedly. But he thought of the ingredients in that doctor's prescription. Was it really a prescription that a normal doctor would prescribe? Boss Luo shook his head. He had seen Miss Maid making medicine. The ingredients used by Miss Maid were sometimes more radical. Boss Luo soon came to Mr. Jacques' study, but the servant told him that Mr. Jacques was accompanying Madame. Boss Luo didn't wait too long in the study before Mr. Jacques came back. "I'm accompanying my wife. She needs to be emotionally stable," Mr. Jacques said directly. "Isabelle is also looking forward to getting better as soon as possible and seeing you. You came to me. Did you already make a decision?" Boss Luo thought for a while. "Mr. Jacques, if you want to take Miss Jean away, have you thought about where to send her?" Mr. Jacques sat down and said, "In fact, the best way is to follow you as your wife or fiancée. After marriage, she can take her husband's surname, which is very good for her safety. But I think you don't seem to have this plan." Boss Luo didn't say anything. Mr. Jacques stared at Boss Luo seriously. "I know that when we were in the mansion, those words and promises we made were just a moment of desperation. I thought you might not be able to survive, so I gave you an incentive. You may also think that at the last moment of your life, you need some motivation. We, in fact, didn't take it seriously, right? But the result is that you came back safely, and I'm a person who keeps my promises. Boss Luo shook his head. No, Mr. Jacques, I don't regard it as the so-called motivation. I'm sincerely happy for your promise, Mr. Jacques. Mr. Jacques looked at Boss Luo in surprise, frowned, and said, So, you really fell in love with my daughter at first sight? Although this matter was, well, it wasn't impossible. Feelings were always very mysterious. But this is better. Jean needs a husband, and if this husband can sincerely accept her, it's naturally better. Luocio thought for a while and said, The kingdom's cavalry should be in the village now. Mr. Jacques nodded. In the evening, I'll visit Baron York, and at that time, it'll be the best time for you to leave. I'll think of a way to prolong this visit. After that, Mr. Jacques suddenly stood up and walked to the bookcase on the side. He opened the bookcase's mechanism, revealing the bookcase's hidden compartment. At this time, Mr. Jacques suddenly turned around, only to see that Luocio didn't pay attention to him. He just sat there quietly and even closed his eyes. Mr. Jacques couldn't help but be moved. He secretly nodded, quickly took out a box from the hidden compartment, and then quickly closed the hidden compartment. There are some things in here. It's my financial support for you. Mr. Jacques took a deep breath and said, In a few years, maybe even longer, you can come back. Jean should be able to inherit my legacy. Boss Luo slowly opened his eyes. Looking at Mr. Jacques' solemn expression at this time, he suddenly said, Sir, if I change my mind halfway and give Miss Jean to the kingdom's cavalry, this may be exchanged for more things for me. What do you think? I don't want to misjudge a person. Mr. Jacques directly said, Then I'll definitely transform into an evil dragon and carry out the craziest revenge on all my enemies. Boss Luo nodded, reached out and took the box, softly said, I'll wait for the time you give me. Bertrand has already arranged the route. Mr. Jacques said seriously, When the time is up, he'll come to pick you up in my place. Boss Luo didn't take long to leave Mr. Jacques' study room. Mr. Jacques once again asked the housemaid to come in front of him and ordered, Prepare a sumptuous dinner. Make some of Miss Jean's favorite food. Yes, master. It's not her 15th birthday yet. This was already the best place to live in the village. Chief Charles's house. Although it was still far from Mr. Jacques' mansion. But in this remote village, it was impossible to ask for too much. Yes, according to our investigation, Jacques came here with his wife 18 years ago and settled down here. The subordinate quickly said, Not long after, Jacques opened a farm and provided a lot of jobs for the locals, so he quickly received the approval of the villagers and then quickly took on some positions in the village. Later, he was even responsible for the tax collection and the village's defense work. Currently, in Donremy village, other than the village chief, Jacques should be the second person with real power. Because of his wealth, he has some advantages over the village chief. We're just here to take people away. Baron York waved his hand and said, This kind of small fight has nothing to do with me. Go prepare. I'm going to see someone tonight. The subordinate subconsciously said, I don't know. Who is it? Baron York said, When I left Jacques' house, he told me that he would visit with his wife tonight. Well, his wife. Nominally, I can't neglect her. What? Jacques brought his wife. The subordinate was stunned. How is this possible? As far as I know, Jacques' wife has been ill for more than 10 years and hasn't appeared in front of people. Ill? Baron York was stunned. What illness? I heard it seems to be leprosy. The subordinate said with a hint of fear. Really? Baron York suddenly frowned, and he gently tapped the armrest of the chair. This guy, what is he thinking? Go and do something for me. Baron York suddenly looked at the subordinate and said in a deep voice, Send a few people to the main roads of the village. People, including the small roads, see who is entering or leaving. The subordinate said, Sir, you mean? Jacques will quietly send people away? How is this possible? Once the new saint enters Chernon, as the new saint's biological father, he will be cleared of all charges and even obtain supreme glory. He has no reason to do this. Baron York said indifferently, I think it's unreasonable that this guy can give birth to a new saint's child. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. As usual. Chapter 2093. Sweet flower? I've never heard of it. Maybe you can try to clean up the gravel by the roadside. Maybe you can find it. Mr. Athanasius said, "Thank you," and then he left. Other than the bat feces and sweet flowers, the other materials were not very troublesome. The materials that had been found were put into the bag that he brought out. If he still couldn't find sweet flowers in the village, it seemed that he could only look for them outside the village. But the sky was gradually darkening. Mr. Assakes was hesitating whether to walk out of the village at this time. At this time, he even thought that the search team that Mr. Jacques ordered in the morning might have returned. Should he ask about the search team? It was important to treat Ludic and the others, but it was equally important to find the missing Durand and Lavar. "Sir, I heard that you are looking for sweet flowers." A young man in the village came to Mr. Assakes at this time. You know, Mr. Assash's face was a little happy. "Yes, I know where to find them." The young man smiled at this time and said, "Although it is not a particularly rare thing, there are still some requirements for the growing environment. If you want to go, I can take you there." "I am very grateful." Mr. Assakes nodded. "It's nothing." The young man said, "I heard about your heroic deeds last night, so I am very honored to do something for you." It's here. I pushed the wooden train to rescue Mr. Jacques and the militia regardless of the danger. The effect of gaining a lot of favorability from Domremy village finally came out. "Shall we go now?" Mr. Assakes asked. "Of course." The young man smiled and said, "Otherwise, we won't be able to come back in time for dinner, and my family will be worried. And the Burgundian cavalry has been wiped out by St. Joan of Arc, so it should be safe outside now." "Well, let's go now." The sky was getting dark, and the orange-red fire clouds had already lined up in the sky. The villagers of Domremy village were still busy dealing with the post-war matters. The Burgundian cavalry was indeed annihilated, but St. Joan swore that summoned the angels did indeed destroy many houses. In addition, there was also the destruction caused when the Burgundian cavalry rushed into the village. The villagers had been busy all day, but they had only cleared a small part of the area. As for rebuilding, it would take a long time. "Take a rest." A villager put down the tool in his hand, wiped his sweat, and sat down beside a dry well. His companions also put down their tools, took out their water bags, and prepared to rest. The two of them chatted idly. "Speaking of which, when did the well dry up?" "It's been more than 10 years, maybe even longer." His companion suddenly stood up and bent down to look at the bottom of the dry well. He smiled and said, "Do you think someone might have accidentally thrown their wallet in there?" Another companion rolled his eyes and said, "If you can dig something out, then it must be the treasure buried by my grandmother's grandmother." It seems like there really is something down there." "Something?" The two of them bent down together and carefully observed the bottom of the dry well. But at this time, the light was dim and the bottom of the dry well was dark, so they could not see anything at all. "Are you too tired and your eyes are blurry?" "Maybe." His companion was not sure. He only saw a flash of orange-red light, but at this time, he really could not see anything. He could not help but feel puzzled. "Forget it. Let's not look. Let's go to your house and dig for the treasure." His companion giggled and said, "I don't know if your grandmother buried any treasures, but I know that you must have hidden your precious wine from your wife." They turned around and were about to pack up their tools and prepare to leave, when suddenly a pair of arms stretched out from the dry well. Before the two of them could react, they were dragged into the dry well in an instant. The old doctor was pounding some leaves in the room slowly. Kate or Lily was dozing off in boredom. Boss Assakes went out to look for medicine, so she was left behind to take care of Ludic Principal and the male assistant. Kate or Lily felt that she had been especially sleepy since last night. Last night, she even fell asleep unknowingly. She did not even wake up when the village was attacked by the Burgundian cavalry. Maybe it was because she was too tired, or was it because her heart was tired? At this time, the old doctor came to Kay or Lily with a small bowl. "I see that you're not very energetic. This is the medicinal soup I just made. It can relieve the fatigue of the body." The maid couldn't help but blink her eyes. She looked at the green liquid in the small bowl and instantly felt a bitter taste in her mouth. "Drink it. It's very effective. Everyone in the village drinks this." The maid did not know what to do. This feeling was like an elder in the family bringing a bowl of folk prescription from God knows where, and then looking at you with a kind and hopeful face, saying, "Drink, child. I've been simmering for a long time, since this doctor had been practicing medicine for a long time and was hired by Mr. Jacques. There should be no problem, right?" Unable to resist the old doctor's kind eyes, Kate or Lily could only force herself to drink the medicinal soup. She did not know whether this thing could relieve fatigue, but the bitter taste was enough to cheer her up. She was instantly refreshed, sticking out her tongue and saying, "I feel completely awake." "That's good." The old doctor smiled, then sat back and continued to pound other medicine. The sound of pounding sounded rhythmically. As the maid listened, her eyelids gradually became heavy. It seemed that she suddenly became unable to open her eyes. "Don't!" Kate or Lily suddenly fell on the floor. The old doctor smiled and said, "In fact, the best way to relieve fatigue is to have a good sleep and then wake up." The door of the room was slightly pushed open at this time. Standing outside the door was Mr. Jacques. There was no extra expression on his face. He held the door handle, but did not completely open the door. He just looked in without saying a word. The old doctor looked up. The door was then closed. The stairs seemed to have been in disrepair for a long time. Even the floor of the corridor made a slight squeaking sound when walking. At the end of the corridor, Mr. Jacques leaned against the window at the end of the corridor. When he heard the sound, he turned around. Miss Maid was holding a plate in her hands, slowly walking over. It was agreed between them that they would start the treatment of Madame Isabel before dinner, but at the same time, the treatment should be kept secret. The reason given by Mr. Jacques was that he didn't want to have too much hope. He only wanted to welcome the result peacefully, no matter good or bad, which sounded very good. "It's ready, monsieur." Mr. Jacques looked at the plate and found that there was not too much on it. "Is this enough?" Miss Maid smiled and said, "Diseases have tortured human beings for countless years. And during those years, human beings have also found a lot of ways to eliminate these diseases. In these years of competition between the two sides, we will discover that as long as we master the pathology and find the best treatment method, the disease that once made people despair is actually an ordinary enemy that can be easily defeated. You give me confidence." Mr. Jacques breathed a sigh of relief. He unlocked the door. Except for him, no one else in this family would have the key to open the door. "By the way, didn't you tell Luo that you're coming?" Mr. Jacques asked casually. "I want to give my master a surprise." Miss Maid looked quite casual. "My master likes surprises and unknowns." "You know him well?" Mr. Jacques said. "You've been with him for a long time." Miss Maid said, "I'll always follow my master." It seemed to be a different answer in question. Mr. Jacques looked at Miss Maid carefully, nodded silently, and then pushed the door of the room open. It was close to dinner time, and the sun had set, so the room was unusually dim. There were no curtains here, and even no airflow. The curtains and bed curtains were slightly swaying at this time, because of the airflow change caused by the door opening. But vaguely, a figure could be seen sitting by the bed curtains. After Miss Maid entered, Mr. Jacques immediately closed the door of the room. Miss Maid didn't seem to care, holding the plate in her hand, walked to the side table and put it down. She put her hands on her lower abdomen, slightly bent down, and said, "Mr. Jacques, maybe you need to leave." Mr. Jacques curiously said, "Why do I need to leave? Isabel and I are husband and wife, so I don't need to leave." Miss Maid didn't say anything. She took out various things from the plate, which seemed to be mixing some powders, and then mixed them into the water, gently stirring. Mr. Jacques looked at her silently. After a while, Miss Maid walked to the edge of the bed with the bowl in her hand. She looked back at Mr. Jacques and saw Mr. Jacques nodding at this time. Then she opened the bed curtains and looked in. There was a person sitting in the bed curtains. She was wearing a gorgeous dress, and all the workmanship was the best. Miss Maid looked at the woman on the bed. The woman was also looking at her without blinking. The reason why the woman's eyes didn't move was this was a completely air-dried corpse. At the same time, a black shadow appeared behind Miss Maid. Then, a heavy blow hit the back of Miss Maid's head. Clang! The small bowl containing the potion fell to the flat ground. Miss Maid also went to the edge of the bed at the same time. Mr. Jacques said softly, "Sorry to disturb you, Isabel." Mr. Jacques bent down and helped the servant girl up from the ground. Then he helped her sit down on a chair. Finally, he opened her mouth and poured some strange powder into it. After doing all this, Mr. Jacques began to wait quietly. He waited until the servant came to the door and knocked on the door to say dinner was ready. Ding! She gently tapped the spoon on the cup. The food on the table was very rich. These were all the girls' favorite food, but there were not many people at the table. Except for Mr. Jacques and Miss Jean, there was only one guest, Luaccio, who was a foreigner. "Why are you alone?" The girl couldn't help frowning. Boss Luo said casually, "Lady Nan said before that she had to go back to the mansion to get something. I think it may be because it's dark and she can't go through the forest alone. Maybe she will come back tomorrow. As for Mr. Assakes, he went out to find some medicine for the doctor. I think he will come back later." "Then what about your maid?" The girl blinked. "Oh, and Miss K. or Lily is also here. Miss K. or Lily is taking care of her companion. She seemed to be tired and fell asleep, so I didn't disturb her," Mr. Jacques said. "As for Miss Yu, she is now treating your mother." "What?" The girl opened her eyes wide and even stood up. "Why didn't anyone tell me such a big thing?" "I hope you'll hear some good news," he said with a smile. Mr. Jacques said softly, "I'm not sure if the treatment will work, so I didn't want to tell you in advance. But now, it seems that the miracle is not only looking after you, but also your mother." "Father, you mean?" The girl's eyes gradually changed into ecstasy. "Yes," Mr. Jacques said with a smile. "The treatment is quite smooth. It is said that this disease can be completely cured in Miss Yuye's hometown. Although she's not a doctor, she knows how to treat it. Maybe in a few days, you can meet and contact with your mother." "I can't wait. I want to see my mother now." The girl suddenly left her seat. Mr. Jacques said, "Your mother is not suitable to contact anyone now. Jean, sit down first." "Why? This is the most important part of the treatment, and also the last part," Mr. Jacques said. "If you want to say why, I also want to know. But, seeing that Isabel is about to recover, I will endure with you, my child." The girl bit her lip. "Then, after dinner, can I talk to my mother? I mean, as usual, I can be separated by the door of the room." "Of course," Mr. Jacques said softly. "I will be with you." "Great." The girl showed a smiling face. She seemed to be impatient. She felt that everything was getting better. "This will be a wonderful evening, everyone." At this time, Mr. Jacques gently tapped the cup with the spoon again, and then raised the cup. "Let us drink to this wonderful evening. Jean, are you not going to propose a toast to the brave Luo?" The girl lowered her head and muttered something, but still obediently raised the cup. Without saying anything, she drank it absent-mindedly. "Don't mind, this child is a bit willful." Mr. Jacques looked at Luaccio apologetically. "I hope you can be more tolerant of her. Like I said, don't worry. If you take care of her more, you will be surprised." "Father." The girl lowered her voice and shouted discontentedly. Mr. Jacques suddenly laughed. "Why don't we enjoy these delicacies now?" With that, Mr. Jacques personally cut a piece of roasted chicken and sent it to Boss Luo's plate, saying that this was the traditional way of cooking in Donnermy village, and it was not seen anywhere else. Boss Luo tasted a few mouthfuls and felt that the taste was really good. "Master." It was the voice of Mr. Jacques' family worker, Bertrand. The young man was standing outside the door at this time. "You can continue." Mr. Jacques got up and left his seat. "Bertrand should be reporting to me about the farm work. This is his daily work. I will be right back." The girl didn't care. Obviously, Bertrand did this work every day. Unknowingly, only the girl and Boss Luo were left at the table. The girl looked at Luaccio at this time and asked softly, "Treating my mother, is it your idea?" Her eyes were even shining. Boss Luo shook his head and said, "I don't have such a request, and I don't even know about this matter." The girl couldn't help but be startled and subconsciously said, "So, it's your maid's idea? Why did she do this?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "Maybe she wants to have a better relationship with Miss Jenna. Is it convenient to serve you together?" The young girl suddenly had such a thought, but then she hurriedly lowered her head and pretended to enjoy the food to cover up the thoughts in her heart. The taste of this grilled fish is also very good. Father likes to use the dead leaves of the roses to grill it, so it has a special fragrance. You should try it too. After thinking about it, the girl took the initiative to cut a piece of grilled fish with a knife and fork, stood up, and wanted to send it to Boss Luo's plate. But she suddenly sat down as soon as she stood up. "What's the matter?" Boss Luo asked. "I don't know." The girl shook her head. "I feel a little tired and a little sleepy. I'm usually very energetic at this time. I don't know why today." Her voice gradually weakened. Unknowingly, the young girl yawned and lay on the table. She actually fell asleep in a daze. The grilled fish taste really like it. Boss Luo wiped his lips with a napkin at this time, then picked up the cup and slowly loosened his fingers. The cup instantly fell to the ground, broken. Then, for the sake of father-in-law, I also, a few seconds after the sound of the cup breaking, Mr. Jacques walked into the dining room with Bertrand. He looked at his daughter who was sleeping on the table, and then looked at the young man who was leaning on the chair with his head lowered. He nodded slowly and said softly, "Bertrand, I'll leave the rest to you." "I know, master." Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS, 4/4. Chapter 2094. Turning over, Nan Xiaonan grunted a few times. She didn't want to wake up. She was so lazy that she had completely given up on thinking. She just wanted to continue sleeping. To put it simply, she was lazing in bed. Of course, most of the reason was because she had detonated her soul power, which caused her to become sluggish. She suddenly sat up, and even her hair stood on end. Her memories before she fainted were coming back. In front of her was a bright place, completely different from the dark cave from before. She had a relatively good experience from a view, but she didn't have the intention to relax. Instead, she became even more nervous, because the black shadow that knocked him unconscious and brought him to this place was standing not far away at this moment, standing in front of a half-kneeling angel statue. Not only was the angel statue half-kneeling, but its hands were also holding swords. But there was no sword in the angel statue's hands. Besides, the angel statue looked as if it would shatter at any time. Nan Xiaonan saw many cracks on the statue. At this time, that mysterious shadow was standing motionlessly in front of the statue with its back facing Nan Xiaonan. Nan Xiaonan carefully moved her lower body, but found that the shadow didn't seem to be aware of it. Therefore, she became bolder, and the extent of her movement became bigger. She observed the surroundings clearly. This place might have been a huge pool or something like that, but for some reason, the water was drained away. But it was a good thing. At least it was convenient to leave. She also saw an exit that seemed to have been smashed by something not far away. Nan Xiaonan took a deep breath, turned around, and rushed toward the exit without a care for anything. But at this moment, she was bounced back as if she had hit a wall. Nan Xiaonan fell to the ground at once. She immediately looked at the thing that bounced her back. It was a monster with a lot of cracks all over its body, with orange-red flames flowing in the cracks. Even if she had encountered a monster, it was impossible for Nan Xiaonan to be truly fearful. She had even killed quite a few void original demons, not to mention other evil spirits and monsters. They couldn't scare Nan Xiaonan, but what shocked Nan Xiaonan was that this mutated guy in front of her was the city lord of Freedom City who had disappeared long ago, Durand. There was no doubt that it was Durand. Even though his body had undergone some unknown changes, his appearance was still the same. Strange thing, Durand's hands were hanging by his side, like a human that had turned into an ape after atavism. He let out a strange hissing sound from his throat and slowly approached Nan Xiaonan. Nan Xiaonan hurriedly got up and retreated. She found that the mutated Durand didn't come closer. It seemed to be afraid of something. Although its eyes were fixed on her, it didn't take another step forward. Nan Xiaonan immediately took a deep breath. She slowly turned around, only to see that the owner of the black shadow had already quietly appeared behind her. It was still the same long black hair that fell to the ground. "Hello." "Hello." Nan Xiaonan quickly forced a smile. "Yi, Mississippi." Are you playing a role-playing game with the boss? The woman with disheveled hair, wearing a tattered black robe, and abnormally pale skin suddenly reached out and strangled Nan Xiaonan's neck again. Again. Nan Xiaonan was lifted up again. Instinctively, she slapped the woman's arm, but the woman's arm was as hard as steel and didn't have the softness that a human body should have. If you have anything to say it properly, Nan Xiaonan said with difficulty. The first time, you didn't kill me. There must be something you... Put me down first. I won't run away. She felt that the woman was in a strange state, an unstable state. She was definitely not the Miss Maid in the shop who pursued perfection in everything. Even if you beat her to death, Nan Xiaonan wouldn't believe that the maid of the shop would make herself look so slovenly. It was as if she was a prisoner who had been imprisoned. Nan Xiaonan didn't dare to guarantee that the servant girl would play some exciting games with the boss in private. But even if she did play some exciting games, she would never make herself so dirty. She was a neat freak. The disheveled black-robed woman released Nan Xiaonan and threw her to the ground casually. Nan Xiaonan touched her neck and took a deep breath. She looked at the strange woman in the black robe in front of her in bewilderment. Although she was sure that the other party was not the servant girl, how could she appear in the image of the servant girl? Besides, the mutated Durand seemed to be afraid of the black-robed woman. "What's your name?" Nan Xiaonan asked tentatively. The black-robed woman didn't answer. She stared at Nan Xiaonan through her messy hair without blinking, which made this witch from the world of academies tremble with fear. Suddenly, the black-robed woman reached out her hand and pointed at the half-kneeling angel statue that was full of cracks. Nan Xiaonan was startled. She frowned and asked subconsciously, "You want me to go to that statue?" The black-robed woman didn't respond. She still maintained the posture of pointing at the angel statue. Nan Xiaonan's throat made a gulping sound. She slowly got up, gritted her teeth, and began to approach the angel statue. She had already arrived in front of the angel statue. More cracks could be seen on the statue. She walked around the statue and found that the source of these cracks seemed to be a deep crack at the back of the statue. "I wonder who did this to me." And then, Nan Xiaonan came to the front of the angel statue again and looked at the black-robed woman with confusion. "What do you want me to do?" The black-robed woman blinked and seemed to be thinking. After a while, the black-robed woman suddenly looked at Durand. Durand began to tremble and even let out a chaotic and rapid cry. The black-robed woman's eyes instantly turned gloomy and cold. Durand roared. Then, as if it had gone mad, it madly crashed into the angel statue. Bang! A loud noise sounded. Durand, however, seemed to have hit an invisible wall and was bounced far away. Durand got up again and continued to roar as it crashed into the angel statue. Again and again, Durand was unable to truly collide with the angel statue. Time after time, it was sent flying and fell to the ground, and the orange-red glow on the cracks on Durand's body gradually dimmed down. The black-robed woman suddenly waved her hand, and Durand finally stopped slamming into the angel statue. The black-robed woman looked at Nan Xiaonan again. I still don't understand?" Nan Xiaonan blinked. She felt that she should still have some leeway to be mischievous. However, the black-robed woman flashed and appeared in front of Nan Xiaonan like a ghost. "I suddenly understood," Lady Nan said as if she suddenly understood. "You want me to help you destroy this statue, right? I'm so smart." The black-robed woman didn't take any further action. Instead, she seemed to be waiting. Nan Xiaonan was speechless. According to the situation of Durand, the angel statue should have some kind of power that could resist attacks and make the black-robed woman afraid to approach it. Nan Xiaonan tentatively stretched out her hand and slowly touched the angel statue's body. She easily penetrated the invisible barrier and directly touched the angel statue's body. The angel statue's defensive power didn't work on her at all. "What's going on? Why can I touch this statue?" Nan Xiaonan was surprised. She even began to crazily consume the stored heat in her body to stimulate the activity of her brain cells and improve her thinking ability. The black-robed woman's purpose was obviously to break the statue. The statue's power made the black-robed woman apprehensive and at the same time made Durand unable to approach it. In other words, the black-robed woman and Durand could be classified as similar in nature. But why could she? Or could it be that as long as the black-robed woman and Durand didn't have similar attributes, the statue's defense wouldn't be triggered? If that's the case, there are many villagers in Dong Remy village. She could just grab a few of them. Or could it be that even the villagers of Dong Remy village couldn't do it? Or could it be that she didn't belong to the Holy Light Kingdom and had different attributes, so she wasn't affected? If that's the case, then Asakes, Kay, or Lily, and even Ludic and the others should be able to do it, right? No, Durand couldn't do it. Durand also came from Free City and was a very high-level petitioner. What's the key factor? Her thinking speed became slower and slower and unknowingly returned to normal. But Nan Xiaonan felt that she was about to pierce through this layer of fog. Damn it, just a little bit more. She had become a bag of bones. The improvement of her thinking speed even used up a lot of the stored fat in her body. Everyone knew this. A girl's fat would only be stored in her waist and buttocks. But when a girl consumes fat, her breasts will become smaller. Nan Xiaonan, don't need to be a woman with a figure and a face. Seeing Nan Xiaonan's body suddenly become abnormally thin, the black-robed woman couldn't help but frown. This was the first time Nan Xiaonan saw the black-robed woman's expression change. Even though it wasn't a good change, she felt that she had no room to be mischievous. Perhaps the black-robed woman had lost her patience. Wait for me. After saying that, Nan Xiaonan quickly ran to the side, picked up a fist-sized piece of gravel, and then returned to the front of the angel statue. She glanced at the black-robed woman and saw that her frown seemed to have loosened a little. Nan Xiaonan took a deep breath and shouted loudly, "Hey!" She held the stone in her hand and then lightly smashed it on the angel statue. Or rather, she pressed it. Who knew what terrible things would happen after breaking the statue? He had always adhered to the principle of never letting his hands get too dirty. At this moment, the black-robed woman suddenly flashed and appeared behind Nan Xiaonan and kicked her without hesitation. This strength was not small. Miss, which from the Academia faction in its subworld instantly flew out and crashed into the side of the angel statue. This hit made Nan Xiaonan feel that her bones were about to fall apart. She almost spat out blood. It could be seen that the black-robed woman's kick was not light. "I'm fine." Nan Xiaonan tried hard to hold back the blood surging in her throat. "You see, I can't break it. Do you want to find someone else? Or I can help you find someone else. I like people who help others the most." The black-robed woman fell into contemplation again and didn't move. Nan Xiaonan slightly breathed a sigh of relief. Although the angel statue was full of cracks, it was surprisingly sturdy. Lady Nan shook her head and stood up, throwing away the fist-sized stone in her hand. Crack! The stone rolled slowly on the ground and just rolled to the base of the angel statue. It was really quiet, even comparable to the slight touch of the defensive master in snooker. Crack! Crack, 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 crack. Like a chain reaction, the cracks on the angel statue began to increase crazily. Finally, it broke into pieces, and it was unusually uniform. Nan Xiaonan looked at her palm with astonishment. "I feel that someone is playing with me." The black-robed woman slightly raised her eyes. A strange smile even appeared on her face. Boom! Hashtag, 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 hashtag. A grayish-black flame shot up into the sky from the shattered angel statue. It dyed the entire underground lake in a grayish hue. At the same time, a gloomy coldness that seemed to be able to erode the soul erupted in all directions with the eruption of the grayish-black flame. Nan Xiaonan was instantly bounced back by the eruption of energy. She only felt cold all over, as if she was surrounded by endless resentment. Her scalp was numb, and endless screams and roars sounded directly in her spiritual world. This kind of spiritual injury was far more difficult to deal with than physical injury. If she didn't deal with it properly, she would be finished in minutes. Lady Nin looked extremely frightened at this time. The black-robed woman was not afraid of the grayish-black flame at this time. She slowly approached the eruption of the flame. Under Nan Xiaonan's horrified gaze, the black-robed woman even directly put her palm into the eruption of the flame. Slowly, the black-robed woman seemed to pull something out of the flame. Gradually it appeared. First, it was a pole. The black-robed woman slowly pulled it out of the grayish-white flame, and the pole gradually grew longer. In the end, what appeared was a grayish-white battle flag with black thorns entwined around it. Lagro Dahin. The voice came from the mouth of the black-robed woman. Nan Xiaonan fiercely pinched her waist and suddenly shivered. While the black-robed woman's attention was all on this strange battle flag, and Durand was half dead at this moment, she turned around and ran away. "Boss, help!" Outside the backyard of Mr. Jacques' house, Bertrand gently helped the sleeping boss Luo into a carriage that was prepared long ago. After putting him together with the young girl, he walked to the front and held the reins. Giddy Dash, Chapter 2095. Just like a passerby participating in the final stage of a marathon, the skinny Nin Xiaonan stumbled as she ran. Not far behind her, Durand was quickly catching up. Obviously, Lady Nin didn't succeed in summoning the invincible boss. What could she do? She could only run. Roar. Suddenly, the mutated Durand opened its mouth, and an orange-red light shot out from its mouth. The straight beam of light brushed past young Miss Nan's shoulder and smashed into the rock in front of her, instantly creating a melted hole. "Miss Nan, do you feel that you're going overboard? Why don't you give me a chance?" Unknowingly, she ran to a cliff with a rapidly flowing subterranean river below. Was this the subterranean river in Dongrami village that Miss Yu had mentioned before? She didn't have time to think further, as Durand had forced her into a dead end. Even if she released another soul attack, she might be able to knock Durand down. However, behind Durand, there was still that strange black-robed woman. The black-robed woman slowly walked over from behind Durand. "Hey, in any case, I did break the statue for you. Well, no matter what, I was the one who broke it with the stone that I threw. Give me some face." Miss then tried to save her life that was in danger. Durand opened its mouth again, and the orange-red light condensed. Lady Nan's eyes suddenly narrowed. She took a step back, and the next step was the surging river below the cliff. She spat out the light beam. "I won't play with you anymore." Lady Nan gritted her teeth and took a deep breath. At the moment when the light beam exploded, she resolutely jumped down with the belief that the Black Soul envoys could be reborn after death. Boom! The powerful beam of light instantly blew up the cliff and melted it. A large piece of rock was even broken off and fell into the underground river below. The splashes were instantly drowned by the rapid flow of the river. The black-robed woman stood at the side and looked at the distant river expressionlessly. Beside her, Durand slowly crouched down and let out a few low gurgling sounds from time to time. After a while, the black-robed woman retracted her gaze and turned around to leave. Durand, on the other hand, used both his hands and legs to quickly follow her. Her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose were all filled with icy cold water, but Nan Xiaonan still forced herself to stay in the water for a period of time before she dared to surface. She frantically breathed in a few mouthfuls of turbid air, but she didn't know where she had been swept to. The overly fast-flowing river made it impossible for her to resist. She could only let the river carry her away. She wanted to save herself, but there was not even a stone protruding from the road. The cold air from the icy river even invaded her innards. She had consumed too much of her energy when she was leaping through her thoughts. Now, she didn't even have any fat under her skin. She was so cold that she kept shivering. Gradually, she even lost control of her hands and feet and became stiff at the same time. At this moment, something in the water seemed to have strangled her ankle and pulled her body in the current. Lady Nan was instantly shocked. She thought that her leg was grabbed by some terrifying thing in the water. She subconsciously kicked a few times, but not only did she not manage to break free, she was even more tightly bound. Nan Xiaonan forced herself to calm down. She realized that she seemed to be entangled by something. She tentatively touched her ankle. She realized that what she touched was not some strange creature, but a rope. It seemed to be a thick and long rope that stretched across both sides of the river. She pulled the rope with difficulty and slowly approached the riverbank. When she finally reached the shore, Nan Xiaonan immediately collapsed on the ground. Her limbs were motionless, and only her chest was rising and falling rapidly. Finally, I'm saved. But who tied this rope? Nan Xiaonan slowly got up and saw that there seemed to be a piece of wood inserted into the rock wall in front of her. She staggered over and found that the wood turned out to be a torch. In addition, there was a small cloth bag hanging next to it, which contained some materials that could be used to make a fire. On the ground, there was even a bag with some clean clothes, but it was a little small. But it seemed to be just right for her current skinny state. She doubtfully lit the torch to illuminate the surroundings, and then found a road. Someone used the underground river water to travel from upstream to here. Nan Xiaonan suddenly thought of something. But who would be so bored to do such a crazy thing? Shaking her head, Lady Nin decided to give up thinking. Her brain didn't have much nutrients to support her thinking. She hoped that she could find something to replenish her calories on the way. It would be better to find something rich in protein. Then she saw a small lizard crawling out from the crack of the rock. The carriage slowly stopped in front of village Chief Charles's house. At this time, there were already several kingdoms' cavalrymen stationed in front of the house. Even the cavalrymen could be seen walking on the road. At this time, when the carriage just stopped, a cavalryman directly stepped forward and asked, "Who is it?" Mr. Jacques poked his head out of the carriage and smiled. "Go and tell your baron that Mr. Jacques and his family have come to visit. Please wait a moment." The cavalryman nodded and quickly turned to go inside. Soon after, the cavalryman came back and said with a cold expression, "You can go in, but the coachman has to stay outside." Mr. Jacques nodded casually, first walked out of the carriage, then turned around and helped a woman wearing a luxurious dress and a veil hat down from the carriage. After the woman came down, she was followed by a girl who was also wearing a veil, but dressed like a young girl. The woman and the girl followed behind Mr. Jacques, and under the cavalryman's lead, they slowly walked into village Chief Charles's house. The house was brightly lit. Baron Yor from a kingdom was wearing casual clothes and was sitting on the sofa, looking somewhat casual. Seeing Mr. Jacques' arrival, he put on a smile on his face. "Mr. York, I have been waiting for your arrival." Baron York hurriedly stood up, opened his arms, and walked forward enthusiastically, even gently hugging Mr. Jacques. "This must be Madame Isabelle." At this time, Baron York looked at the woman behind Mr. Jacques and stepped forward. No matter what, if this was the real Princess Isabelle, he couldn't neglect her. When nobles meet, the minimum greeting was necessary. Perhaps there would be a hand kiss, but he heard that this Madame Isabelle had leprosy. Baron York wasn't sure if this was a lie made up by Jacques to prevent people from discovering Isabelle's identity. Fortunately, the woman didn't intend to kiss his hand. She just stood there quietly and nodded slightly. Baron York didn't mind and quickly greeted them into the living room as he said, "Village Chief Charles is a hospitable person. Not only did he give up his house for me to live in temporarily, but he was also afraid of disturbing me, so he moved to another place. I always thought Charles was very suitable for this kind of thing," Mr. Jacques said with a casual smile. At this time, Baron York opened a bottle of wine. He said that he had brought it from Chernon and that it was a box of gifts from the Crown Prince. This was the last bottle. There's no need to say more. Mr. Jacques shook his head and said seriously, "Sir Baron, let's talk about what we discussed during the day." Baron York didn't seem to be in a hurry. He said slowly, "Mr. Jacques, didn't you say you didn't understand what I said? I discussed it with Isabelle." Mr. Jacques said directly. Mr. Jacques said directly, "I agree to let you bring Jean back, but I have a condition." Baron York smelled the aroma of the wine and made a pleased gesture. "Other than Jean, I hope that my wife and I can go to Chernon with you," Mr. Jacques said calmly. This didn't seem to be out of Baron York's expectation. He smiled without being surprised. "After returning to Chernon, I hope to hold a grand wedding for Mr. Jacques and your wife." Mr. Jacques looked at Baron York with surprise and shook his head. "No need. I don't want too many people to know that I entered Chernon. Baron York squinted his eyes. Don't worry. I haven't finished yet, Mr. Jacques. Mr. Jacques frowned. I hope to hold a grand wedding for Mr. Jacques and your wife, Baron York said slowly. Baron York said slowly, but the premise is that you really let me bring the new saint back to Sinan. She is my daughter. Mr. Jacques pointed at the girl, sitting quietly on the side, expressionlessly. Baron York said calmly, Mr. Jacques, don't tell me you think that you can find a random girl and make her the new saint. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Jacques said calmly. This is my daughter. Your daughter? Baron York chuckled. There's no one in Dong Remy village who doesn't know who your daughter is. They've never seen her before, right? It was not difficult to distinguish between them. Why do you have to make it difficult for me? This is the order of the royal family. I can't say I made a mistake because I was confused. This will ruin my future and even my family. I said, this is my daughter. Mr. Jacques shook his head. I brought my daughter as you asked. It's your business whether you want to admit it or not. It should be about time, Baron York suddenly said. What time? Mr. Jacques asked calmly. Baron York smiled and said, the cavalry I sent out should be catching up to that carriage soon. I'm talking about the carriage that left from your back door not long ago. Monsieur Jacques exhaled slowly. Baron York shook his head and stood up. You don't think that I'll do nothing, do you? Mayor Charles is an honest man. He even told me about your family members. I can't say for sure if this lady on the ground is Madame Isabel, but I'm afraid this lady is not the real Miss Jean, Mr. Jacques said. If that's the case, then our family will leave now. It seems like there's nothing to talk about. Don't worry. Baron York waved his hand and said, Mr. Jacques, didn't you say you want to go to Chernon with me? Where do you want to go? After the carriage comes back, we can leave. In fact, I don't want to stay here any longer. There's not even a dancer here. It's a poor place. 6 cavalrymen pushed the door open and entered. They were guarding in front of the door. Mr. Jacques sighed again slowly and said, Actually, you promised me that you would take us back to Chernon. Everything will be fine. Baron York, your wisdom may not bring you good luck. Baron York smiled indifferently and took it as a weak roar of a loser. He waved his hand and ordered the cavalrymen who entered the door. Take good care of Mr. Jacques and his family. After the carriage comes back, we'll leave immediately. With that, Baron York sat back on the sofa lazily, raised his wine glass, and shook it gently. He looked at Mr. Jacques in front of him with interest. This was an enigmatic man. His background was a mystery, but he was so talented that he had charmed countless noble ladies in Chernon. He had even taken away the princess of the royal family and eloped for nearly 20 years. Even after 20 years, this man still looked very elegant and charming. This man had a pair of deep blue eyes like the sea. He was indeed very charming. Baron York thought subconsciously. He looked at Mr. Jacques' deep blue eyes and subconsciously felt like he was looking at the real sea. He seemed to be caught in a whirlpool and gradually lost his voice. Suddenly, Baron York saw a pair of scarlet eyes in this huge whirlpool. The sapphire-like eyes seemed to turn into blood-stained diamonds in an instant. Baron York only felt a sense of suffocation that made it difficult for him to breathe. He even felt like his heart was being grasped. A scream suddenly broke the silence of the night in Donnermy village. Baron York's spirits struggled out of the whirlpool. He had unknowingly broken out in a cold sweat and subconsciously asked, "What happened?" "I don't know. The sound seems to be coming from outside." A cavalryman in the room said quickly, "I'll go outside and see what happened." With that, the cavalryman pushed the door open and walked out. Baron York frowned and looked at Mr. Jacques again, but he found that Mr. Jacques had entered the room and even closed his eyes slowly. Is it because of the alcohol? Baron York subconsciously put down the wine glass in his hand. Time passed slowly, and Mr. Jacques still didn't move. Baron York was about to speak, but the cavalryman who went to inquire hurriedly knocked the door open and entered with a panicked expression. Sir, you better come out and see," the cavalryman said in horror. Something strange happened. What's the matter?" Baron York stood up impatiently. The cavalryman said, "The villagers outside have become very, very strange." Chapter 2096. Countless halos floated in the air, and lines of mysterious symbols flickered in the halos. These symbols represented the status of each angel in the kingdom of heaven. They were generally divided into normal status, abnormal status, and finally, special status. There were also unstable status in between. Unstable status would be included in the observation list. These were all confidential data. Apart from only Ligel, who was in charge of monitoring the good deeds of angels, had the authority to access these data. The palace of the second heaven, the palace of Angel Ligel, was a unique place in the kingdom of heaven. There were not many angels living here, and Angel Ligel in the palace of the second heaven never commanded the angel army. This place was like the offices of civil officials in countless worlds, quiet and secluded. When the young man in white quietly left the kingdom of holy light and returned to the kingdom of heaven and came to the palace of the second heaven, there was only one angel cleaning in front of the door. The angel in charge of cleaning didn't even know that a great angel had come to the palace of the second heaven. Like a gentle breeze, the gentle breeze blew into the depths of the palace of the second heaven, where countless halos gathered. Ligel, the young man in white's voice sounded in this unique space. In the sea of halos, a handsome angel was twisting his wrist. In front of the angel, the halos began to move and arrange themselves. The angel didn't stop because of the call. However, he spoke. "I think it's about time you came back to find me." The young man in white was silent for a while before slowly saying, "What do you mean?" The angel said indifferently, "First, tell me your purpose of coming to find me." Ligel. The young man in white looked at him quietly for a while and said, "I found something in the kingdom of holy light. This is the record of what I found this time. Take a look." The young man in white waved his hand, and a light shot toward Angel Ligel. The light immediately sank into the halo in front of Angel Ligel. "Perhaps this is a very direct action." Angel Ligel frowned, and once again distinguished between the light and the halo. After a while, Angel Ligel showed a look of understanding. "What do you want to prove?" Angel Ligel suddenly asked. "I can only answer you that these data have indeed been changed." The white-clothed youth frowned and said, "Who changed these records behind the scenes?" Angel Laurel shook her head and said, "I can't answer your question. This is the destiny system of the Holy Light Kingdom, not the database of the Kingdom of Heaven. I'm just one of the developers of the destiny system. I don't have absolute authority." "Even you can't?" The white-clothed young man muttered. Angel Ligel slowly said, "In fact, every person with the highest authority in the Holy Light Kingdom can secretly modify the destiny system to a certain extent, and they can do it anonymously. Although we, as developers, can check the modification process through the background, there is no way to check the real identity of the person who modified it." The young man in white said with dissatisfaction, "Why didn't I know about this?" Angel Ligel said, "If the Supreme Beings had known about this from the start, they would have been afraid that one or more of them would have set things up according to their own preferences. Therefore, they would have considered adding some rules for the Supreme Beings." "Then why are you telling me now?" The young man in white asked expressionlessly. Angel Ligel smiled faintly and said, "You're already here, and you're still questioning me. I'm afraid that you'll beat me. I can't beat you anyway." The young man in white slowly sighed. He worried so much for Heavenly Kingdom, but these guys were all so undisciplined. He quickly suppressed the unhappiness in his heart, but at the same time, he was also alarmed by the unhappiness in his heart. He needed to maintain absolute purity. Any thoughts that would lead to depravity had to be cut off as soon as he discovered it. Otherwise, with his power, once he fell, he would become another fallen dawn, or even worse. That would be a fatal blow to the kingdom of heaven. Then, according to what you said, the anonymous person behind this also knew the truth, so he didn't hesitate to modify it? The young man in white pondered and said, "How did the anonymous person know the truth?" Angel Ligel calmly said, "Logically speaking, only the developers know the truth. The Supreme Person of the Holy Light Kingdom can only know this secret from the developers. Otherwise, it can only be told by Father. Let's first rule out the possibility of Father, right? That means me and the other developers are all suspects." Angel Legel paused here. He looked at the young man in white and suddenly smiled. Are you going to lock me up first? The young man in white snorted and said, You know I can't do that. If I lock you up, who will be responsible for the inspection of the kingdom of heaven? You will make the kingdom of heaven a mess. Angel Legel shrugged and said, Then, the only thing I can help you with is to restore the changed data for you. Then restore it. The young man in white nodded and then said, Why do you think I'll come back to find you? You always knew about the abnormalities in the data. Angel Legel shook his head and said, The database of the kingdom of heaven is enough to give me a headache. The destiny system of the Holy Light Kingdom itself is very complete, and there are other developers. Under normal circumstances, I won't pay too much attention to it. This time, because you came to find me, I took the time to take a look. Then you? Angel Legel looked deeply at the young man in white and said, She seems to be back. Who? The young man in white was stunned. Angel Legel slowly said, Every developer of the Destiny system has a channel that they can use to enter the system's backend. All these years, we've been trying to close the channel that belongs to her, but we haven't been able to do so. After all, she's the first developer of the Destiny system. Where is she? The young man in white's eyes narrowed, and his tone became much heavier. Angel Legel just shook his head and said, Maybe somewhere in the kingdom of heaven, or maybe just outside. If she wants to enter the backend, she can do it anywhere. It's just that for so many years, she never took the initiative to enter. Her sudden appearance this time might mean something to release some kind of signal. The young man in white was silent. Angel Legel thought for a while and said, I'm telling you this because I think you might have a better judgment than us regarding this signal. After all, she was brought to heaven by you in the beginning. The young man in white remained silent. He was holding the original copy of the altered data that was recovered by Angel Legel. After a while, the young man in white sighed and said, You need to be careful about this matter. Not many people know about this. Angel Legel shook his head and said, This is a taboo topic. Apart from you, no one else knows about it. You can rest assured. The young man in white nodded and said, From now on, can you use your authority to temporarily close the Destiny System's data modification authority? For a short time, yes. Legel thought for a while and said, As time goes on, it will be more difficult for you to find out the truth. In these 2 days, if the anonymous person wants to modify the data again, they will find something. Give me 2 days. The young man in white thought for a while and said, Okay. Angel Legel nodded and said, If you want to fool other developers, 2 days is still possible. However, it's only 2 days. For the sake of Enoch, I'll find Medanzo for you. The young man in white nodded lightly. Go, Meyer. Angel Legel put his hands together and prayed. May the holy light be with you, Prince of Light. Dong Remy Village, in front of Village Chief Charles's residence. Under the protection of a group of cavalry, Baron York stood in front of the door with a shocked expression. In front of him, a dozen or so cavalrymen had formed a human wall. The people that the human wall blocked were the villagers of Dong Remy Village. These villagers were all in an abnormal state. It was as if they had lost their rationality and were like zombies. Men, women, old and young. They looked ferocious as they charged at the cavalry. There were at least 20 villagers charging at the human wall, but Baron York could already see that not far away, more villagers were starting to walk over at this moment. Their appearances were exactly the same. What the hell is this? Baron York had been in the army for many years, but he had never seen such a strange thing. The appearance of these villagers was even more terrifying than the dark witchcraft he had heard of. Lord Baron, if this continues, we won't be able to resist them. A cavalryman said anxiously, Please give the order quickly. The cavalrymen were only resisting and didn't use their weapons. Without the orders of the important figures, even as cavalrymen, that didn't dare to kill civilians. Moreover, these were civilians who were isolated but still insisted on the rule of the royal family. If this matter was leaked out, they would be sent to court. Baron York didn't want to give the order to kill unless it was absolutely necessary. He gritted his teeth and shouted, Come back. Close the door. Damn it. Let's get ready to break out and leave. The cavalrymen received the order and immediately started to move. Under the protection of 2 cavalrymen, Baron York hurriedly returned to his residence. At this time, the cavalrymen moved a large number of heavy objects from Charles's house and began to pile them up in front of the door. They planned to break out from the back door and leave. In the chaotic front yard, Baron York frowned, but he didn't know when Mr. Jacques had come to the front yard. Other than Mr. Jacques, the woman and girl wearing a veil and hat were standing quietly behind Mr. Jacques. They really do look like a family, Baron York muttered to himself before quickly stepping forward. The situation outside isn't looking good. Get ready and follow me out of here first, Mr. Jacques said indifferently. What happened outside? Something terrible, Baron York said in a low voice. I even suspect that this matter has something to do with you, but I have no evidence. Mr. Jacques looked at Baron York calmly. Baron York gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, Guards, watch them. Saying that, Baron York hurriedly went to command a group of cavalry. I wonder if the people who were sent to chase after the carriage have succeeded in bringing back the people? Giddy dash. Bertrand waved the reins, but the horse pulling the carriage wasn't too obedient. These weren't horses that had always been domesticated on the farm. They were caught in the wild and hadn't been domesticated for a long time. Moreover, the road at night wasn't easy to travel on, and Bertrand didn't dare to turn on the lights in case he was discovered. But the carriage had to stop in the end. On the road ahead, there was a fallen tree. Bertrand had to tighten the reins and stop the horse in a hurry. However, the huge inertia still made the carriage tilt and almost flip over. At the same time, 3 figures suddenly rushed out from around the fallen tree. They rushed to Bertrand in an instant. Bertrand couldn't react in time and was instantly knocked down from the carriage. Then 2 of them directly pressed him to the ground. Don't struggle. We don't intend to hurt anyone. We just want to bring the people in the carriage back. You're the Baron's men? Bertrand gritted his teeth and said. Under the moonlight, Bertrand vaguely saw the cavalry uniforms of the 3 people. He already had a guess in his heart. He didn't expect Baron York's men to come so quickly. He hadn't even completely walked out of the range of Domremy village. At this time, a cavalryman walked directly to the door of the carriage and said loudly, Miss Jenna, please come out. We know you're in the carriage. If you don't want the coachman to get hurt, please cooperate with us. There was no response. The cavalryman had to say the same words again. However, there was still no response from the carriage. The cavalryman frowned and said loudly, I'm sorry. With that, the cavalryman took out his weapon and carefully inserted it into the gap of the door. With a force, he instantly pried open the carriage. What's the matter? After preying open the door, the cavalryman exclaimed in a low voice. He saw that the carriage was empty at a glance. There was no way to hide anyone at all. The cavalryman couldn't help but be furious. He walked directly to Bertrand, who was pressed to the ground, and reached out to grab Bertrand's collar. Where is she? Where did you hide her? Bertrand said innocently, I don't know who you're talking about. I just followed my master's instructions and drove to a nearby town to pick up a friend of my master's to be a guest. Be honest. The cavalryman immediately pulled Bertrand's arm, almost breaking it. Bertrand was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. I really don't know who she is. It's useless even if you kill me. Bertrand gritted his teeth and endured the pain. The cavalryman snorted coldly and ordered, tie him to the tree. I have plenty of ways to make him talk. If they didn't complete the Baron's order, they didn't dare to return casually. They could only torture information out of Bertrand on the spot to carry out the next step. The 3 cavalrymen worked together and easily tied Bertrand to a tree on the side. One of the cavalrymen took some thorny twigs from nearby and twisted them into a makeshift whip. He grinned and said, You will suffer less. Bertrand gritted his teeth and turned his face to the side. The cavalryman sneered and raised the thorny whip in his hand. Just as he was about to swing it down, a fist-sized rock was suddenly thrown from the dark and smashed into the cavalryman's head. In an instant, the cavalryman's head was bleeding profusely. There, the cavalryman who was hit in the head covered the bleeding wound. He raised his weapon and rushed into the dark in an instant. The other 2 cavalrymen saw this and hurriedly chased after him. Bertrand frowned at this time. He didn't know who was helping him. Logically speaking, no one should know that he took this route. But at this moment, Bertrand felt that his hands tied behind the trunk seemed to be loosened a little at this time. "Who is it?" Bertrand asked in shock and horror. Don't talk. They will be back soon." "You are." Bertrand couldn't help but be startled because he recognized the voice of the speaker. "Mr. Asakes? How did you—" "I found the sweet flower." Mr. Asakes, who was untying the rope, suddenly said at this time, "Do you believe it?" Chapter 2097. The three cavalrymen didn't chase far because they quickly felt that this might be a bait. When they returned immediately, their guess was confirmed. Damn it, they shouldn't have gone far. Let's split up and keep in touch with the whistle. The cavalrymen quickly mounted their horses and galloped off in two different directions with a murderous look on their faces. After the cavalrymen left, two figures quietly crawled out from the bottom of the carriage not long after. "Mr. Asakes, your method is really thrilling. If these cavalrymen check carefully, we won't be able to escape." Bertrand sighed slowly at this time, calming the tension in his heart. Mr. Asakes also sat on the ground at this time. He wiped his cold sweat and said, "It turns out that we are lucky. Also, these cavalrymen are not very mentally developed." "Mentally developed?" Bertrand couldn't help but be startled. That's a very novel way of saying it. "I'm also applying what I've learned on the spot from a very dignified lady." "Let's not talk about this first." Mr. Asakes shook his head. "What are you going to do now?" Bertrand asked knowingly, "What are you going to do?" Mr. Asakes stood up and patted the mud on his body. During the day, a very energetic young man in the village said that he would take me to find sweet flowers. I was quite happy at first, but guess what? "What?" Bertrand asked. "That guy actually wanted to kill me." Mr. Asakes said with a straight face, "You should understand that in that case, I could only defend myself. It's a pity that the young man died." You killed him?" Bertrand's expression changed slightly. He rushed forward at once and grabbed Mr. Asash's collar with both hands. "How could you kill him? Did I have to stand still and let him kill me?" Mr. Asakes said expressionlessly. "Impossible." Bertrand was furious. "You are lying. He couldn't have wanted to kill you, Mr. Asakes. He just wants to take you away. At most, he would just knock you out." "Yes, I lied. I'm guilty." Mr. Asakes suddenly sighed. "And you also told the truth, didn't you?" "You? I didn't kill him, and he didn't intend to kill me." Mr. Asakes shook his head and said, "It's just that the next time you want to do similar work, you should find someone with more experience. That child is too nervous, and—" At this moment, Mr. Arthashes raised his arm and flexed his biceps. He revealed a row of white teeth and said, "I've been training my body regularly." Bertrand didn't know whether to laugh or to be angry. He let go of Asakes and sighed. "Originally, I should have lured you away, but unfortunately, I had other tasks at the time. I really couldn't help it." "What's the other mission you mentioned?" Mr. Asakes frowned and said, "That boy refused to say anything." "Bertrand, for the sake of saving you once, shouldn't you tell me something? You and Mr. Jacques. What are you planning behind the scenes?" Bertrand sighed. "It's a bit complicated. I just wanted to complete the master's orders. These cavalries have caught up with me, so I don't have to continue to escape. Mr. Asakes, I'm going back to the village now. If possible, you should leave now. For the sake of saving me, I won't tell anyone that we have met. I can't leave my companions and leave alone." Mr. Asakes shook his head. "If you want to go back, I'll go back with you. I want to ask your master face to face. I also have some private things that I want to ask." Bertrand looked hesitant. At this moment, Mr. Arthashes suddenly frowned and looked up at the night sky thoughtfully. "Is there a celebration tonight in Dongermy village?" "No. Why do you ask?" Bertrand asked subconsciously. Mr. Asakes pointed to the night sky and said, "Then why is there a fire?" Bertrand instantly turned his head and saw a touch of crimson under the night sky. He opened his mouth in shock. What the hell is this? Her sense of touch was gradually recovering. When she realized that she was lying in a cold place, the girl's consciousness had already begun to recover, and she was soon fully awake. She opened her eyes and looked around subconsciously. Soon, She saw the fiancé who was special to her, Boss Luo, who was lying beside the girl at this moment. Both of them were tied tightly with ropes. The girl struggled a few times, and the ropes became tighter. "Wake up, wake up!" The girl moved her body, approached Boss Luo, and whispered to him, "Don't waste your energy. The anesthetic I fed him can even knock down an elephant. He won't wake up for at least 3 to 5 days. You, on the other hand, are worthy of being the girl chosen by the God of miracles. Your physique is a bit beyond my imagination. It's really surprising that you can wake up so quickly." At this moment, a woman's voice suddenly sounded. The girl couldn't help but tremble slightly. She suddenly looked in the direction of the voice, and her face instantly showed an incredible expression. She saw a familiar person. A person who had been taking care of her since she was a child. The family's maid. "Miss Asman?" The girl Jenna trembled. "How could it be you?" The young girl didn't know why the maid, Miss Asman, would tie her up. This Miss Asman had always taken care of her and even covered for her, allowing her to escape from her father's sight and freely hunt in the forest. Miss Asman said she was a maid, but she was more like an older sister. "Are you surprised?" The maid, Miss Asman, slowly said. "Or are you a bit angry?" "Why?" The girl took a deep breath and asked expressionlessly. "Why what?" Miss Asman faintly smiled and said, "Why are you tied up here? Or why me? What do you want to do?" The girl calmly asked. Miss Asman indifferently said, "According to Master's orders, I want to send Miss Jenna to a safe place." The girl took a deep breath and bitterly smiled. "Father's actions are really fast, but I didn't expect that he would choose such a method. He chose to do it during a family dinner, and even chose to do it when I was the happiest. In the future, you will gain even more happiness, Miss Jenna." Miss Asman softly said. The girl coldly snorted. "From your point of view, do you think I'm living a so-called happy life? Mr. Jacques sincerely hopes that you, Miss Jenna, can have an ordinary and beautiful life." Miss Asman shook her head. "It's hard for me to explain everything to you. Moreover, if I explain it to you all at once, I'm afraid you won't be able to accept it. You will slowly understand. I hope that when the time comes, you will still be as optimistic as before." The girl was silent. She looked at the unmoving fiancé lying beside her, and for some reason, she felt a lot more at ease. What if he never wakes up? An anesthetic that can knock down an elephant? He's not an elephant. You're too much. Don't worry. This man will give you happiness in the future. How can I bear to hurt him?" Miss Asman faintly smiled and said, "Not only will I not hurt him, but I will even give him a completely different life." The girl subconsciously frowned. She understood that Miss Asman might take her and Luaccio to an unfamiliar place to live with new identities. She was already planning to escape from Miss Asman's hands. Father wanted to send her away. Perhaps this would be a very good opportunity to leave Dong Remy village. But sort of victory wasn't here. Did Father take it away? Or did he still leave it at home? The girl couldn't be sure. Perhaps she could only inquire for Miss Asman. At this moment, Miss Asman's action interrupted the girl's thoughts. She stared at Miss Asman's hands in astonishment. A fist-sized light ball floated out from each of Miss Asman's palms. The moment these 2 light balls appeared from Miss Asman's hands, the floor also released an incandescent brilliance at the same time. Only then did the girl realize that the place where she and Luaccio were lying was actually engraved with a huge circular array. "Asma, what are you doing? What is this?" The girl was bewildered. "This?" Miss Asman chuckled and said, "They call this thing Destiny System." As she spoke, Miss Asman directly came in front of the girl and slowly pressed one of the light balls onto the girl's chest. The light ball began to enter the girl's body bit by bit. At the same time, the huge circular array engraved on the floor continued to release an even more dazzling light. "Actually, you shouldn't have woken up so early, because the implantation takes a lot of time, and," Miss Asman suddenly said, "the experience isn't very good." Just as Miss Asman's voice sounded, the girl instantly felt an extremely terrifying pain erupting from her chest. She didn't have time to think. Her thoughts were instantly drowned by the intense pain. Miss Assman, who was focused on implanting the light ball into the girl, didn't notice that the young man, who should have been unconscious for 3 to 5 days, suddenly opened his eyes, and the ropes on his body unknowingly loosened. The cavalrymen came to report that they were ready to break out of the encirclement at any time. Sir Baron, more and more villagers are gathering at the front door. It looks like these villagers won't return to normal in a short time. There are only 10 villagers at the back door. Now is the best time to break out. If we wait any longer, the number will increase. Sir, there's no time to lose. Baron York gritted his teeth and ordered his subordinates to break out of the encirclement. As for the few cavalrymen sent to chase after the carriage, they could only leave marks along the way. Or it would be best if those cavalrymen could meet up on the way. After instructing his subordinates, Baron York quickly found Mr. Jacques and his family. He didn't say much to Mr. Jacques and directly ordered his subordinates to show their weapons and threatened Mr. Jacques and his family to move. Mr. Jacques suddenly said, "They're afraid of light, especially fire. Light the torches. This will make it easier for you to break out of the encirclement." Fire? Baron York instantly frowned. He looked at Mr. Jacques in confusion. "How do you know?" Mr. Jacques said calmly. "Before you arrived, the Burgundian cavalrymen attacked. Those Burgundian cavalrymen were exactly the same as the villagers now. We've experienced battle, so we know that they're afraid of fire." "You mean that the reason these villagers became like this is because of the Burgundian cavalrymen?" Baron York's heart sank. He was afraid that the villagers' mutation was some kind of evil power controlled by the Burgundian Duke. But Mr. Jacques shook his head at this moment. Baron York didn't know whether Mr. Jacques didn't know or didn't intend to say. He pondered for a while and directly ordered, "Light the fire. Since these guys are afraid of fire, then we'll burn this place." Mr. Jacques glanced at Baron York indifferently. "Lord Baron, you're the type to do things thoroughly. It's on your account," Baron York said expressionlessly. "I hope you're not lying." Monsieur Jacques closed his eyes. "Whoa!" The cavalrymen received the order and poured kerosene on the walls around the courtyard and directly ignited it. In an instant, village chief Charles's residence was in flames. Under the light of the huge fire, the villagers who surrounded village chief Charles's house all had a trace of fear on their faces. They retreated and looked like they wanted to rush forward, but they couldn't get close to the flames. "It works." The cavalrymen were delighted. Baron York immediately ordered, "Evacuate immediately." In an instant, the back door of village chief Charles's house was knocked open by the cavalrymen. The dozen or so villagers surrounding the back door were instantly knocked into a mess under the cavalrymen's charge. Under the protection of the cavalrymen, Baron York and Mr. Jacques family directly rushed out of village chief Charles's house. Because the house was burning, the villagers seemed to be attracted by the flames. A group of cavalrymen protected Baron York and Mr. Jacques family and smoothly walked to the entrance of the village. The cavalrymen's horses were placed here. Once they got on the war horses, they would gallop all the way, and the villagers wouldn't be able to catch up. A trace of relief appeared on Baron York's face. However, when everyone arrived at the place where the war horses were placed, they saw a mess. The war horses all fell to the ground, dripping with blood, and at this time, among the many war horses' corpses, there was a strange figure standing. Baron York sucked in a breath of cold air. Standing among the war horses' corpses was a guy whose skin was cracked, and orange-red light flowed out of his body. His body was emitting waves of heat. He looked like a human, but not a human. "Levi?" Mr. Jacques suddenly frowned and showed a surprised expression. Obviously, he recognized the identity of this guy with cracks all over an orange-red light at a glance. It was the missing Levi? ######## PS. The title won't be very long, at most 5. Chapter 2098. The death of the war horses was extremely tragic. Many war horses were even torn apart alive. The cavalrymen had deep feelings for the war horses. At this moment, the cavalrymen's eyes were bloodshot. If it wasn't for the terrifying figure standing in the middle of the war horse corpses, the cavalrymen would have raised their swords and killed him. You know this guy? Baron York was standing next to Mr. Jacques, so he obviously heard what Mr. Jacques said. An outsider. Mr. Jacques thought for a moment and said, he disappeared after the Burgundian cavalrymen attacked yesterday. I didn't expect him to become like this. Why is his transformation different from the villagers? Baron York quickly determined that there was a fundamental difference between the mutation of this outsider and the villagers. Perhaps his physique is different, Mr. Jacques said calmly. But now it seems that if we don't deal with this guy, we won't be able to leave. I will. Baron York gritted his teeth and said, he killed so many of my war horses. Even if he is a devil, I won't let him go. Come, get the crossbows. Pierce through this monster. In an instant, 10 cavalrymen pulled out their crossbows and knelt in a row. They had been waiting for a long time. They didn't even wait for Baron York's order and shot out the arrows. The power of the crossbows was enough to pierce through weaker armor, let alone flesh and blood. However, the moment the sharp arrows shot out, this outsider named Laval, his body strangely twisted. Laval flipped his hands and fell to the ground with his back facing the sky. The cavalrymen thought that Lavar only leaned back to dodge the first shot. They quickly reloaded the arrows. However, Lavar was actually crawling on the ground. The joints of Lavar's hands and feet seemed to be reversed. When he crawled over, his head turned in the right direction. He looked like a spider. This extremely strange scene made the cavalrymen suck in a breath of cold air. Before they could react, Lavar, who looked like a human spider, suddenly jumped up and landed in the middle of the cavalrymen. He swept around crazily. It could no longer be called a human. It was shaped like a monster, and its strength was boundless. The armored cavalrymen were easily swept away. Moreover, a large part of their breastplate was directly smashed into the ground. This time, Baron York had only brought 30 cavalrymen to deliver the urgent letter from the royal family. They had rushed over through the night, and in the blink of an eye, at least 4 or 5 cavalrymen had died. Baron York was shocked and angry. It took a lot of time and money to train a cavalry, not to mention that this was his own personal guard. Don't panic. Don't panic, Baron York roared. As someone who came from the army, he had a baleful aura around him. Use the chains. Baron York held a metal chain in his hand and charged into the chaotic battlefield. Seeing this, a few of the personal guards immediately understood. They had followed Baron York for many years and had a tacit understanding. They all grabbed the iron chains and scattered around Baron York. In the blink of an eye, numerous thick iron chains were thrown out, causing the creepy crawling Lavar to fall into the iron net made by the iron chains. Green roots appeared on Baron York's arm. He sucked in a breath of air, but didn't spit it out. He used all his strength to pull on one end of the iron chain. Lavar was entangled. At this moment, the cavalrymen were pulling on the iron chains with all their might, firmly holding him in place. Chop! Baron York roared. The remaining cavalrymen attacked at almost the same time. The sharp swords in their hands stabbed out. At least 5 sharp swords stabbed into Lavar's chest and back in an instant. Lavar instantly stopped struggling. He stood there motionlessly and lowered his head. Success! Baron York raised his arm and shouted. However, before Baron York could rejoice, he heard the cavalier who had stabbed Lavar with his sword exclaim in shock. This cavalryman threw down the sword in his hand and retreated 2 steps in panic. The other cavalryman who used swords did the same. The sword is burning red. The sword that fell on the ground was not only red but also melted. Lavar, who lowered his head, suddenly raised his head. His mouth cracked open and revealed a creepy smile. The iron chains that bound his body turned red at a visible speed. Baron York subconsciously felt a burning pain in his palm. He threw down the iron chains in his hand in shock. His palm felt like it was burned by fire. The pain made him sweat profusely. What kind of monster is this? Baron York's eyes narrowed. A black shadow flashed in front of his eyes, and then he felt a suffocating pain coming from his chest. He subconsciously turned his head and saw that his chest had been directly pierced by something at this moment. That was something that stretched out from Lavar's back like a scorpion's tail. Lavar was still crawling on the ground like a human spider. The tail that appeared from his back lifted Baron York's body up high. Baron York is dead. We can't deal with this monster. The few cavalrymen who were scared out of their wits suddenly fell to the ground. They kicked their legs and frantically moved backwards. Soon after, they got up and dashed toward the back in fear. It was like a signal. The loss of morale and the death of their leader. Coupled with fear, the cavalrymen instantly collapsed and fled in all directions. However, they seemed to have become prey. Lavar swung his tail, and Baron York's corpse was instantly thrown out, crashing into the wooden fence built by the villagers for defense. Laval leaped high into the air and grabbed the closest cavalryman, pinning him to the ground. He grabbed the cavalryman's hands and tore with force. The cavalryman was instantly torn into two halves. This was a bloody slaughterhouse. Facing the dripping blood, Mr. Jacques was unusually calm as he stayed in place. Behind him, his wife and daughter, the two women wearing veils, were still standing quietly beside Mr. Jacques. At this moment, in the midst of the slaughter, two figures could be seen running towards Mr. Jacques. Along the way, they knocked down two fleeing cavalrymen. But after the cavalrymen fell down, they immediately got up and ignored them, desperately trying to run further away. These two people hurriedly came to Mr. Jacques' side, Bertrand and Mr. Essex. "Master," Bertrand quickly said, "we saw the fire." But Mr. Jacques shook his head slightly, hinting Bertrand to stop talking. Mr. Jacques glanced at Arthaces and suddenly smiled. "Sweet flower, have you found it? What was this?" Mr. Essex was startled. He sized up Mr. Jacques with uncertainty, but he didn't know why he was so calm at this moment. "Is that really Lavar?" Mr. Essex didn't have time to ask the question in his mind. He locked his eyes on the monster who was killing the cavalrymen and running further and further away. "How did he become like this?" "I heard that people who lose their faith will turn into monsters," Mr. Jacques suddenly said. "They will turn into the things they are most afraid of. This Mr. Lavar probably doesn't like spiders and scorpions." "How did you know?" Mr. Essex looked at Mr. Jacques in disbelief. Lavar was indeed very afraid of scorpions and spiders, but this was a very private matter, and it was hard for outsiders to know. Besides, this wasn't the City of Freedom. Mr. Jacques shook his head and looked at Mr. Essex. "What about you? What are you afraid of?" "I'm afraid." Mr. Essex gritted his teeth and grabbed Mr. Jacques' collar. He said furiously, "Who the hell are you? Why do you call yourself the owner of the Rose Mansion? I knew something was wrong with you since you walked into the mansion. Don't you already know who I am?" Mr. Jacques said softly. Mr. Essex frowned. When he was about to speak, he saw the girl standing behind Mr. Jacques. His expression froze, and he pushed Mr. Jacques away. He walked up to the girl and took off the veil on her head. "Kate or Lily?" Seeing that the girl's face was actually that of the maid he had picked up from the mansion, Carrie, Essex was enraged. He immediately looked at the other woman wearing a veil and waved his hand to remove her veil as well. As expected, Yi Miz. Seeing Kay or Lily and Ms. Yi, who was the first guest of the Rose Mansion, Mr. Assash's mind was in chaos. "What on earth did you do to them?" At this moment, Arthaces realized that whether it was Lily or Miss Yi, their current state was very similar to that of Ludic and Duran's male assistant. They were like empty shells without any thoughts. Their expressions were dull and lifeless. Mr. Jacques slowly sighed and said with a gloomy expression, "This place. Actually, it has been a long time since someone from the outside came here." "What?" Mr. Essex frowned. Mr. Jacques suddenly stopped talking, and his calm expression even changed a little. He gazed into the distance, and his expression gradually became solemn. He muttered to himself, "Who opened it? Don't stop halfway." Mr. Essex was furious. When he was about to speak, he saw an orange light in the distance. "Laval is back." "Not good, let's go." "Let's go first." Laval should have chased after the cavalries, but he didn't expect him to return so quickly. "No need," she came out. "It doesn't matter where we go." Mr. Jacques shook his head. "Her? Who?" Mr. Jacques slowly said, "My daughter." "You mean Ms. Jean?" Mr. Essex said subconsciously. But soon, he saw that the orange light that was supposed to be one suddenly turned into two. Not only Lavelle, there was another person beside Lavelle. It was Durand, the Durand who had been missing since the beginning. Durand looked almost the same as Lavelle. However, unlike Lavelle, who looked like a spider and a scorpion, Durand looked more like a dog. Beside Lavelle and Durand, there was a woman in a tattered black robe. Her long hair reached the ground, and she walked barefoot. Her face couldn't be seen clearly, but she held a flag spear in her hand. Beside this black-robed woman, Lavelle and Durand were tamed like pets. The woman was getting closer and closer. Mr. Essex even saw the faint smile on this woman's face, and he couldn't help but shiver. He didn't know why he was afraid. He was just instinctively afraid. His whole body was afraid because of this woman's approach. "Go to Rose Mansion, bring them along." At this moment, Mr. Jacques suddenly said, "I was going to send you to the Rose Mansion, but you came back by yourself. You really are like the Dark family. You're not leaving?" Mr. Essex asked subconsciously. "If I leave, no one will stop her. Haven't you always been curious about who I am?" Mr. Jacques slowly walked out as he said, "Do you still remember the legend that Jean told you about in the village?" Mr. Essex was startled. He didn't understand why Mr. Jacques would suddenly mention this bedtime story that was used to scare children. But in the next moment, the doubt in his heart turned into fear. At this moment, Arthasius's eyes widened. He saw something. He saw Mr. Jacques' body rapidly expanding. The expanding body instantly tore apart his clothes, but it wasn't just that. Mr. Jacques' body was expanding at an extremely fast speed, and it was even transforming. With a continuous roar that made one's scalp tingle, Mr. Jacques' body began to have fine scales. His arms turned into terrifying sharp claws. His back even split open, and fleshy wings that were more than 20 meters long spread out. A huge black horn grew out of his head, and his eyes turned crimson red. He became a dragon. He became a huge black dragon that bared its fangs and brandished its claws. As he roared, the earth seemed to shake. Seeing this, Asash's mind almost went blank. He muttered to himself, "A dragon slayer turned into an evil dragon. Are you the legendary dragon slayer?" But at this time, Mr. Jacques, who had transformed into an evil dragon, directly waved his huge wings and swept K.R. Lily, Monsieur Essex, and Bertrand away. Then a light ball wrapped around the four of them and directly pushed them out of the village. After that, Mr. Jacques, who had transformed into an evil black dragon, flapped his wings and soared into the sky. In the next moment, Mr. Jacques had already arrived in front of the woman in the black robe. "You shouldn't have come out." The voice came from the evil dragon's mouth. "I'm not here for you. The woman in the black robe didn't raise her head. Instead, she stared at the light ball that flew away and suddenly murmured, "I smell her scent." Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS1. Same as before. PS2. Thank you, Boss Wudong, for doing a lot for this book as the Chief Operating Officer. PS3. 0/1. Chapter 2099. A long, long time ago, legend had it that there was an evil witch who used the hearts of innocent boys and girls as the source of her power. Evil ruled the earth, and fear ruled people's hearts. Until one day, a hero held a sword and carried out a crusade against the evil witch. The hero succeeded. He nailed the evil witch to death in a pure lake. However, the witch's blood polluted the pure lake. The hero bathed in the polluted lake water and was cursed by the witch before she died. He turned into an evil dragon and lived in the polluted lake. He would lure disobedient children to sacrifice their hearts. The legendary story instantly appeared in Arthasius's mind. This was something he had heard from the other children out of curiosity when he was wandering around the village. The conclusion was that it was almost the same as the legend told by the girl Jean. But Mr. Essex never thought that the legend was true. The evil dragon really existed, and this evil dragon turned out to be Mr. Jacques. Not only did the question not get answered, but it also multiplied after Mr. Jacques turned into an evil dragon. However, Asashis was unable to ask now. The evil dragon's final sweep swept the group of people far away. After landing, they had a look at the village to see its outline. Mr. Assakes, let's go to Rose Mansion. Bertrand grabbed Assash's arm as soon as they landed. I hope we can catch up. Catch up with what? Mr. Assakes waved his hand and looked straight at Bertrand. You don't seem to be surprised that Mr. Jacques turned into an evil dragon. No matter what happens here, I won't be surprised. Bertrand sighed slowly. Let's go to Rose Mansion. I'll tell you something when we get there. Assakes frowned. At this time, he could only believe Bertrand's words for the time being. Otherwise, what could he do? Run back to the village to deal with Mr. Jacques' enemy? The mysterious woman in black was Mr. Jacques' enemy. Otherwise, Mr. Jacques wouldn't have turned into an evil dragon. In other words, even if he had the physique that he had developed after being single for more than 30 years, he wouldn't be able to deal with an enemy that required him to transform into an evil dragon, right? If I leave now, what about Ludic and the rest? They are still in the village. They haven't woken up yet. You can rest assured about that. At this time, Bertrand said directly, about your 2 sick companions, Mr. Arthashes, we have already sent them to the mansion ahead of time. Assakes couldn't help but be startled and subconsciously asked, then what about Luo? I can't leave him behind. He's Mrs. Fiancé, so he'll only arrive at the mansion earlier than you. Mr. Arthashes was instantly displeased. How could one be so biased? What happened to the saying that all men were equal? I used to be a pretty boy who was popular in Freedom Academy, okay? He pondered for a while and glanced at Kate Air Lily beside him. Since Kate Air Lily was here, and Ludic and the rest were also sent to the mansion, then, wait, where's Yi? Mr. Assakes was suddenly shocked, because he suddenly realized one thing. After landing, he didn't realize that Miss Yi wasn't with him. Not only him, even Bertrand didn't realize this problem. What's the matter? She's not with us? Bertrand was shocked at this time. Wait, she hasn't been here since just now. I don't remember. Maybe it was too rushed. Assakes shook his head. Bertrand gritted his teeth and said, we can't take care of her. If she's still in the village, the master may take care of her. Mr. Bertrand, please help me take Kate Air Lily safely to the mansion. Mr. Assakes took a deep breath and said, that lady is my guest. I won't leave my guest behind. Are you crazy? Mr. Assakes ignored him and patted Bertrand's shoulder heavily. Then, he gritted his teeth and rushed to the village again. What a stubborn holy light citizen. Bertrand sighed at this time. He shook his head and immediately carried Kate Air Lily on his back and rushed into the forest in front. No one knew when the battle started. The first one to attack was Delink. As soon as it opened its mouth, an orange-red light beam shot out and rushed toward Mr. Jacques, who had transformed into a black dragon. As a black dragon, it had the power of an evil dragon in people's imagination. The orange-red light beam shot directly at the black dragon's body, but it only blasted off a few of its scales. Later, Lavar also joined the battle. Even though Durand and Laval were much stronger due to their mutation, they were still tiny before the black dragon. The only thing that could help them resist the black dragon was the terrifying heat emitted from their bodies. The black-clothed woman holding the battle flag watched the battle expressionlessly. At the same time, the villagers of Donremy village had given up on blocking village Chief Charles's house. They rushed out from all over the village and rushed toward the black dragon. Not only were there young and strong villagers, but there were also old people, women, and even children. Even village Chief Charles was among them. Even the cavaliers who died at the hands of Laval raised their weapons and charged at Mr. Jacques, who had transformed into a vicious dragon. They were like zombies that crawled out from their graves. They're all fighting against you. Isn't it ironic? In the night wind, the black-clothed woman's figure slowly appeared. Stop this meaningless resistance. I said that I'm not looking for you. The response was the decisive roar of the black dragon. However, the enraged dragon did not kill the villagers who waved their swords at it. Even Rand and Lavar were repelled by the black dragon time and time again, then drowned in the flames of revenge. The black-clothed woman said softly. In an instant, the entire Donremy village was ignited with black flames, as if a sad song was being sung. The black-clothed woman waved the flag spear in her hand in the middle of the black flames, and a black light flashed. In the next moment, the black dragon let out a painful cry. A huge wound appeared on the black dragon's body. It almost cut through its entire chest and abdomen. The black dragon instantly lost most of its ability to move and fell to the ground. The people, like ants, rushed toward the black dragon's body. Fight the dragon. In the circle that continued to release strong light, half of the light ball had completely merged with the girl's body. It seemed that it was only a matter of time before the remaining half was merged. Miss Assman, who was operating all of this, was still focused on it. This was obviously a very tiring job, and she couldn't make any mistakes. Just at this moment, I heard that every destiny system has a serial number. Then, where did this destiny system come from? The maid of the Jacques family, Miss Assman, almost thought that she was hallucinating. Her hands trembled slightly, and she almost made a fatal mistake. She had to force herself to stop the work at hand, and there was a trace of horror in her eyes. She finally realized that the young man who was drugged with a large dose of anesthetic and wouldn't wake up in a short period of time had woken up without her knowing. He even untied himself. At this moment, he was like an obedient student standing behind a teacher who was doing an experiment. Yes, when Miss Assman turned around, Boss Luo was standing behind her. "Am I disturbing you? How did you?" Miss Assman was shocked, but she couldn't loosen her hands at this moment. Although there was a storm in her heart, she still kept calm. Boss Luo said slowly, "I'm just looking." Under the premise that Miss Jenna's life is not in danger, you can continue your work. Miss Assman, right? And thank you for preparing dinner for us tonight. The grilled fish is delicious. You're welcome. Miss Assman had to show a stiff smile. She was assessing the consequences if she stopped what she was doing. She soon found that the outcome of her assessment was unbearable. Miss Assman, you haven't answered my question. What question? She asked knowingly. Boss Luo said patiently, about the problem of the unique serial number of the destiny system. Or rather, how did you solve it? Miss Assman's gaze shifted and she frowned. I'm already surprised that you can wake up like this. What's even more surprising is that before I sent you here, I already checked you. You don't have the destiny system on you. Can you please explain? Yes, I don't have it. Boss Luo nodded. I shouldn't be able to install it. But if you want to install it, it's possible. It depends on the situation. So who are you? Miss Assman took a deep breath. Who are you? The saint? Or that person? Who is that person that Miss Assman is talking about? Boss Luo asked curiously. Miss Assman wanted to stall for time, so she said sarcastically, who else? Of course, it's that similar to God, the incarnation of the holy light. Saint Michael. Boss Luo said, why do you think that I'm from one of the two sides? Except for them. Miss Assman sneered. Who would care about what happens in Dong Remy village? Boss Luo thought for a while and said, it's strange. Miss Assman, you've always been in Dong Remy village, but why do I feel like you're very familiar with Freedom City? Guess. Miss Assman chuckled. Assuming that you've lived in Freedom City before, Boss Luo smiled casually, then everything will be more logical. Continue. Miss Assman's expression didn't change as she calculated the time in her heart. Miss Assman, you might have to move faster, Boss Luo suddenly said. Mr. Jacques' situation might not be very good. What did you say? Miss Assman couldn't help but frown. Soon after, she coldly said, you think this can distract me? Boss Luo shook his head. At this moment, the door of the mysterious dark room suddenly opened. Miss Assman's expression froze as she saw Bertrand carrying the maid, Kay, Lily hurriedly running in. Who let you in? Miss Assman yelled angrily. Bertrand put down Kay, Lily, and said with a serious expression, Master became a dragon. The one buried in the underground lake also woke up. What did you say? Miss Assman was shocked. I don't want to repeat myself. You heard me. Bertrand said directly, Miss, how long will it take for you to recover? And when did this guy wake up? I think I need an explanation too. I have a lot of problems on my side too. Miss Assman yelled irritably. There's something wrong with this guy. With him here, I can't calm down. I'll take care of it. Bertrand rushed into the circle without saying anything and stood in front of Miss Assman. He looked at Boss Luo and said seriously, "Although you're Miss Assman's fiancé, you've also offended the future son-in-law." With that, Bertrand clenched his fists and waved his hands. Boss Luo just raised his hand slightly and said calmly, "I've already asked Miss Assman to move faster, so you see, I didn't mean to stop you. Also, I want to remind you too that it's almost midnight." Bertrand frowned at this moment. He didn't react, but Miss Assman's expression changed slightly and she blurted out, "How did you know?" Boss Luo blinked and said, "Didn't we and Mr. Asakes come to Dong Remy village after midnight?" Miss Assman's expression turned ugly and she said with difficulty, "So, you actually don't know much?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "Miss Assman's reaction just now let me know more. So, midnight does have a special meaning, right?" Miss Assman was silent for a moment and sighed. At this time, Freedom City's Rose Mansion and Dong Remy Village's Rose Mansion will have a short moment of reversal. This will be the only way to leave this place. Boss Luo said in realization, "That's right, if you're not in a hurry, you can leave at this time tomorrow." Miss Assman opened her mouth. "Seems like it's true. So what's going on?" "Of course, I'm just saying." Boss Luo immediately smiled and then took out a pocket watch from his pocket and looked at the time. "There's still half an hour left, Miss Assman." Bertrand and Miss Assman looked at each other. Miss Assman gritted her teeth and took a deep breath. She continued to focus all her attention on the implantation of the destiny system. Bertrand still maintained a vigilant posture and did not relax for a moment. He suddenly thought of something and said indifferently, "You seem to be very free, but I forgot to tell you one thing. Your maid may not be in a very good situation at the moment. She may even be in danger." Boss Luo smiled and said, "I'll give her a day off today and let her do something she wants to do. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS 1/1. Chapter 2100. The original location of the exit was not far from Mr. Jacques' farm. But when Nan Xiaonan returned to Mr. Jacques' mansion, she didn't see anyone in the house. All she could see was the fire in the village ahead, the grayish-black fire. Instantly, Lady Nan thought that the terrible woman in the black robe she met in the underground lake had caught up with her. As for why she appeared in the village, she didn't know for the time being. Nan Xiaonan thought that as long as she returned here, to the boss's side, everything would be fine, but she didn't expect that the house was empty. Even Ludic and his male assistant, who were supposed to be patients, were not in the room they were supposed to be in. She felt that she shouldn't stay in this place any longer. God knows when the grayish-black fire would burn this big house. After breaking the angel statue and pulling out the flag as a weapon, the strange woman seemed to have sobered up a lot. Lady Nan came to Mr. Jacques' kitchen before she was ready to escape. If she didn't replenish her energy, she was afraid that her breasts wouldn't be able to be saved. Although she didn't rely on her breasts to make a living, she was talented, but what if one day the boss suddenly became a beast and wanted to attack her? She couldn't resist, and then she could only rely on her breasts to make a living. The secret of living without purpose was to resign oneself to adversity. When there was no way to resist, just try to enjoy it. Although clamping one's legs was the last struggle against fate, it also took a lot of courage to open one's legs. Based on her observation of the boss, she knew that the boss wouldn't go berserk. But in the theory of probability, even if the probability was 0, it didn't mean that it couldn't happen. Thump! Suddenly, there was a crashing sound from upstairs, which instantly interrupted the imagination of the witch from the world of academies. She almost choked and had to beat her chest a few times. Thump! The sound was heard again. Nan Xiaonan immediately reached out and picked up a kitchen knife, carefully and softly walking upstairs. The sound seemed to be coming from the young girl Jean's room. The door of the room was ajar. There was no one inside, so naturally there was no light inside. However, the night was not dark. With the help of the moonlight and the firelight, Nan Xiaonan could barely see what was happening in the room. At this time, there was a young girl with a round face floating in the room. What was this young girl doing? At this moment, she was holding a stone sword that was leaning against the corner of the wall with both hands. The palm-sized wings on her back were flapping crazily. However, this little fellow seemed to be using all her strength, but she couldn't lift the stone sword at all. Perhaps a young girl wouldn't be able to lift it at all. At this moment, the door of the room creaked open. The young girl immediately hid in panic. She saw Lady Nan frowning and slowly walking in with a kitchen knife. Lady Nan glanced at the little guy who was hiding behind the curtain and poking his head out. She didn't pay attention to him and just kept her stone sword close to the ground. The young girl Jean called it the Sword of Victory. Nan Xiaonan saw the scene where the young girl raised the Sword of Victory and summoned the shadow of an angel to kill the Burgundian cavalry. But at this moment, it was the first time she was looking at the Sword of Victory at such a close distance. This sword, her heart skipped a beat, and a thought suddenly flashed in her mind. The Sword of Victory might have been pulled out from the hands of the angel statue in the underground lake. She remembered the angel statue's appearance. The angel statue's hands were missing something. It was missing a sword. Nan Xiaonan subconsciously reached out and grabbed the hilt of the stone sword. She wrinkled her brows and then suddenly exerted some strength. She used too much strength, and the stone sword was suddenly lifted up. She even almost threw it out of her hand. Am I also a person chosen by God's miracle? Nan Xiaonan looked at the stone sword that she had lifted up in disbelief. There were many possibilities. At this moment, the little guy hiding behind the curtain suddenly flew out and grabbed Nan Xiaonan's sleeve. Where do you want to take me? Nan Xiaonan instinctively asked. Back, 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 back. The little guy said anxiously. Back to what? Lady Nan blinked her eyes. The little guy immediately danced with joy, pointing and gesticulating as he flew here and there. You mean send this sword back to the hands of the statue in the underground lake? Nan Xiaonan quickly said. The little guy immediately showed a happy expression and nodded vigorously. Then, the witch from the World Academy said awkwardly, but I smashed that statue, and it seemed to be quite thorough. The little guy suddenly opened his eyes wide, and his face immediately turned red. He directly flew to Lady Nan's face and punched and kicked crazily. At this moment, a loud and shrill roar resounded through the sky. Nan Xiaonan didn't care about the little guy's punches and kicks. She grabbed the little guy by the back of his neck and rushed to the window to look over. She saw that in the burning flames, there was a vague, huge figure. At this moment, it was writhing in the flames, sometimes falling down, sometimes struggling to stand up, looking up at the sky, roaring and wailing. At this moment, the little guy broke free and grabbed Nan Xiaonan's sleeve again. He anxiously pulled and at the same time pointed at the burning village. You mean you want me to go? She nodded. Such a dangerous thing is not suitable for me. Lady Nan directly refused. She even shook her head and put the Sword of Victory in her hand back into the distance. She quickly said, I haven't been here before. I don't know anything. The little guy probably never thought that there would be such a person in the world. At this moment, he was dumbfounded. Come, I haven't seen you before, and you haven't seen me before. The next time we meet, we will be good friends. Lady Nan said very seriously while slowly retreating. Kill, kill. You, danger. She was very sensitive to the word danger. Hearing this, she instantly stopped. What did you just say? Nan Xiaonan suddenly frowned. At this moment, the little girl gritted her teeth and suddenly flew to Nan Xiaonan. She directly held Nan Xiaonan's forehead with both hands and put her forehead on it. Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but be startled at this moment. Some strange scenes began to flow into her mind quickly. After a while, Lady Nan suddenly cursed. Unexpectedly, it's because of the destiny system, Nan Xiaonan whispered. Even a fake one counts? No, this means, damn, was I set up? The black dragon finally fell down. At this moment, the cavalry's weapons madly stabbed into the huge wound on its chest. Durand and Lavelle directly jumped onto its body and began to crazily tear off the scales on its body. It seemed to have lost the strength to stand up again. Its huge head directly rested on the eaves of a house. Suddenly, a large amount of particles overflowed from the black dragon's body. It immediately changed back to Mr. Jacques' appearance, but the terrible wound was still on Mr. Jacques' body. After returning to his human form, the wound was even more ghastly. Mr. Jacques. It was as if his chest and abdomen had almost been cut open. He spat out blood and lay on the stone of the collapsed house. Around him, there are not only crazy villagers, but also crazy cavalry, Durand and Laval. Mr. Jacques struggled to stand up again, but just as he propped himself up, he instantly fell down powerlessly again. He looked at the black-clothed woman who controlled everything, as if he wanted to say something. At this moment, the black-clothed woman waved her hand. Durand instantly rushed forward and lifted Mr. Jacques up with both hands, but didn't do anything else. The crazy villagers and cavalry became strangely quiet at this moment. It was eerily quiet all around. At this moment, the black-clothed woman said indifferently, "You still don't plan to come out. Or, even if you watch him die like this, you can still be indifferent." Cough. Jahan, I already sent away. Mr. Jacques' face showed an ugly smile. I didn't think you would come out, send her away. I just didn't want her to go to Chernon. The black-clothed woman walked to Mr. Jacques' side expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Whether she goes to Chernon or not, whether she is here or not, it has nothing to do with me. I'm not talking about this fake." Jacques looked perplexed. Nothing to do with me? Mr. Jacques muttered to himself, "For you? Who matters to you? Could it be?" At this moment, a loud roar sounded. He saw a chariot full of firewood, which had been completely ignited, crazily crashing into the villagers. Behind the wooden carriage was Mr. Assaix, whose hands and feet were wrapped in a thick quilt, with 2 kitchen knives on his waist and a hoe on his back. The black-clothed woman looked at the burning wooden carriage indifferently and didn't move. How could she be hurt by this thing? However, the crazy villagers and cavalry seemed to be naturally afraid of the light and heat of the fire. At this moment, they all roared but retreated. Only Durand and Laval weren't afraid of the light and heat of the fire. Laval even swept its whip-like scorpion tail and smashed the wooden carriage into pieces. At this moment, Mr. Arthesis could only hold onto the wooden strips in a daze. He gritted his teeth and took the opportunity to raise the 2 wooden strips in front of him to block. However, he found that these 2 wooden sticks weren't aggressive at all, so he quickly threw them away and pulled out the 2 kitchen knives from his waist. The hoe. It was too late. Laval stood in front of Mr. Assaix, and its huge scorpion tail was raised high as if it would pounce at any time. "Believe me, if you can recover, you'll never want to remember this appearance, Laval." Mr. Assaix took a deep breath and said, even though his voice was trembling, "Who asked you to come back? I asked you to leave." Mr. Jacques said weakly with a hint of anger. Mr. Assaix said, "I've passed level 10 in Sage's quotations. I can even recite Sage's quotations backwards. Do you know what this means?" Mr. Jacques didn't have the mood to care about this at this moment. "This means that I won't leave you to die." Mr. Assaix took a deep breath and said, "Even if you know that you'll die because of saving people, you should be fearless. This is the last pride of the descendant of the Sage family." Mr. Jacques opened his mouth, but didn't say anything in the end, and his face gradually dimmed. "It's really praiseworthy." The woman in black suddenly chuckled. "I thought only she has this God-given courage and sense of mission. Now it seems that it's not God-given. Perhaps it's always existed in the depths of the dark family's bloodline." "You are." Mr. Assaix looked at the woman in black in front of him, and he couldn't help but reveal an inconceivable expression. He said in shock, "You, miss? How did you know your hair?" The woman in black suddenly looked serious. Her gaze was so sharp that Assaix even felt like being pricked by needles. The woman in black waved her hand, and Mr. Assaix was directly grabbed by an invisible force and sent to the front of the woman in black. She stared into Mr. Assaix's eyes and said with a strange smile, "What did you say just now?" "I didn't say anything." Mr. Assaix said calmly at this time, "I'll let you say it." The woman in black said indifferently. In an instant, Mr. Assaix's body began to burn with a grayish-black flame. The flame wasn't strong, but it completely wrapped Mr. Assaix. The temperature at the center of the flame wasn't high, This was the physics knowledge he learned in junior high school. But Mr. Assakes wanted to curse at this time. The temperature of the grayish-black flame was indeed not high. But he felt pain, a pain that penetrated his heart, a pain that seeped into his bones. His body clearly didn't have any burn marks, but all the nerves in his body were feeling the pain of being roasted by a raging fire. It was just a few seconds, but it felt like 100 years had passed. The grayish-black flame suddenly extinguished, and Mr. Assash's eyes were already dazed. He suddenly knelt on the ground, and then directly fell down. The so-called descendant of the Saint family is only at this level. The woman in black calmly looked at the twitching Assakes after falling to the ground. However, although he's a descendant of the Saint family, strictly speaking, he's only a descendant with the name Dark. He's not left by her. While twitching, Assash's eyes regained a trace of light. He suddenly stretched out his hand and directly grabbed the woman in black's scattered tattered robe. "You're quite stubborn," the woman in black said indifferently, "but I won't be merciful because of this. I was born to take revenge." After saying this simply, the woman in black turned the flag spear in her hand and directly stabbed toward Assash's back. Ding! Assakes subconsciously closed his eyes, but he heard the sound of metal colliding. The expected piercing sensation didn't appear. He opened his eyes and saw that the huge flag spear had been blocked. What blocked this terrifying flag spear was actually a rusty sword that seemed like it would break at any time. It was the rusty sword that he found in the basement of the Rose Mansion. "Miss Yi, this time you barely passed. Assakes, you're finally willing to appear." Three completely different voices sounded almost at the same time. Chapter 2101. The name of the president of the City of Dawn was Balaam. He was an old man with a unique hairstyle and white eyeshadow. He often said in his speeches, "Let the City of Dawn become greater. May the one who is similar to the Lord also become greater." President Balaam said excitedly in front of Angel Londo, "The City of Dawn hasn't had a great existence descend upon it for a long time. We finally have the attention of a great existence. This proves that our prayers can reach the other side." Angel Londo didn't like this passionate president of the City of Dawn. However, the great existences of the other 6 capitals were only responsible for supervising the City of Dawn. They wouldn't interfere with the internal affairs of the City of Dawn. This president of Balaam was elected by the City of Dawn. Even if someone wanted to criticize him, only the great existences of the 6 capitals could do so. Cut the crap. I'll follow the orders of the Archangel, who rules over everything. I'll perform the investigation on behalf of the Archangel. Angel Londo said, "President Balaam, please show me the account of the prayers you've received." "I'll need some time." President Balaam said seriously, "My lord, you must know that we don't know about this, so we can't prepare in advance. Hurry up." Angel Londo waved his hand. "I don't need anyone to wait on me. I like a quiet environment. I'll give you half a day at most. You can leave now." President Balaam nodded respectfully and walked out quickly. He slowly closed the door. When there was only a small gap left, President Balaam's gaze was still fixed on Angel Londo. Angel Londo didn't seem to care. He just sat on the chair lazily and rested his chin on his hand as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, Langdo's hand reached into a box in his bosom. His hand casually grabbed a few red and white pills and directly threw them into his mouth. He chewed and swallowed. Angel Londo reached out his hand again and grabbed a few more red and white pills. He tossed them into his mouth again, chewed, and swallowed them. Angel Londo didn't seem to want to stop. He kept swallowing the pills in the box while thinking about something. He didn't seem to realize that he couldn't stop taking the pills. He didn't even think it was wrong. The gap of the door finally closed tightly. After leaving the room, a strange smile appeared on Balaam's face. A high-level angel is only SOSO. President Balaam's secretary was already waiting in the study. When President Balaam entered, his secretary hurriedly said, "Mr. President, half a day isn't enough time for us to calculate everything. Please buy us some more time." "No need." President Balaam smiled and said, "Lord Angel is in a good mood. He will forget the time." The secretary's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt, but she still nodded. The Grand President sat down and opened a bottle of carbonated drink that could make people happy. He also turned on the television. He liked to drink this kind of refreshing carbonated drink while watching TV, checking his phone for updates, and interacting with the citizens of the City of Dawn on social media. Today is also a happy day. Mr. President uploaded the motion picture he had just taken. Is there anything else? The president's secretary then opened the notebook in his hand and took out an invitation card. This is an invitation from the Saint City, Orleans. It has just arrived. Invitation? Mr. President was a little surprised. Who sent the invitation? What's the content? The owner of the invitation is the Saint of Orleans. The secretary had a trace of reverence on her face as she slowly said, "The City of Freedom Academy is about to hold the Holy Maiden as coronation ceremony, so everyone in the 7 capitals is invited to attend the ceremony." Attend the ceremony? Mr. President lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Since the Saint of Orleans sent the invitation personally, I have to go no matter what. Go prepare for the visit to Orleans. That Lord Angel, do we really not need to pay attention to him for the time being? The secretary couldn't help but ask, "Mr. President, if you go to Orleans, then Lord Angel, I will go with Lord Londo to attend the ceremony." President Ballum smiled and said, "He will agree soon. Then, I will go prepare the itinerary." The secretary nodded and was about to leave the office. Mr. President continued to watch the TV comfortably. There was a live boxing match on the TV. This was a local tournament held by the City of Dawn, and one of the boxers was even the president's favorite. However, his mind wasn't on the boxing match at the moment, even if the player he liked, Joe, was completely at a disadvantage. Attending the ceremony, the 7 capitals, Mr. President bit the straw and muttered to himself, "With such a good reason, I think that person might also appear. After all, it's an invitation from the saint." Suddenly, Mr. President picked up the phone. "Let Joe win," Mr. President said casually, surviving in a desperate situation, the appearance of a miracle, the courage to challenge a powerful opponent, and finally to victory. How much resonance can this bring? Joe's spirit will always remain on this stage. Even if he can't go on stage after this match, there will be more young people who will yearn for this stage and rush to it. Without waiting for any response from the other side, Mr. President hung up the phone. On the TV, the match had entered the 3rd round. The young boxer, who was seriously injured, once again stood up with a strong will. City of Freedom, Freedomport, on the beach along the coast. A child who was playing suddenly came to a big rock nearby and curiously looked at a young man in white who was leaning against the rock, seemingly asleep. The child had noticed the arrival of Brother Ja, the big brother in white, early in the morning. However, after the big brother in white came to the beach, he had been sitting here and looking at the sea silently. He even fell asleep. Children were always curious. The child became playful and couldn't help but poke the big brother in white with his small shovel. He originally wanted to poke the big brother in white's shoulder. However, the big brother in white suddenly opened his eyes. The child was startled and didn't even hold the small shovel firmly. "How long have I slept?" the young man in white suddenly asked. The child was startled and subconsciously said, "I think I fell asleep not long after I came here. I have been sleeping until now. It's already sunset." The young man in white looked at the red sunset on the sea. "Today I am a little tired. Thank you for waking me up." "Ah, me? I didn't. Go back. Your parents are calling you." The young man in white stood up at this time and picked up the small shovel that the child threw on the ground. He gently stroked the child's head. "May the holy light be with you." This naughty brat still understood. He also said, "Big brother, may the holy light be with you." The young man in white showed a smile. The child suddenly realized that this big brother in white looked really good when he smiled. The child's parents came, and their voices came from behind the rock. The child hurriedly walked out and called out to his parents. When he turned around, the big brother in white had already disappeared. Only the afterglow of the setting sun was left, reflecting the golden light waves on the sea. He followed his parents and left the beach. The tourists on the beach also gradually left. Not long after, the moonlight began to appear. Behind a rock, a young man in white slowly walked out. He lowered his head and stroked his chest with his hand, muttering to himself, "Isn't the effect of Maria's mark a bit too good? I haven't slept for a long time." After leaving Miguel's palace of the second day, he returned to the Holy Light Kingdom and quietly landed in the Freedom City. He came to the beach of the Freeport. He originally planned to quietly think about something and didn't expect that he would fall asleep unknowingly. Perhaps it was because it was rare for him to fall asleep, but he felt very good. Although 30% of his origin had strangely disappeared, his mental state was unexpectedly good at this time. After pondering for a while, the young man in white directly disappeared from the beach of the Freeport. The next moment, the young man in white appeared in front of an old mansion, Rose Mansion. He was silent in front of the door for a moment and finally stepped in. Dong Remy Village. This time I barely passed. Ass sakes. Hearing the voice of Ms. Yi, who blocked the terrifying battle flag with a worn-out rusty sword, Asash's body instinctively trembled. He was inexplicably afraid of Ms. Yi's gaze. Even when his strict grandmother was still alive, he didn't feel so afraid. "Ms. Yi, how could you?" At this time, Ms. Yi raised the iron sword in her hand forcefully. It was originally blocking the battle flag, but now the battle flag was directly bounced away. Perhaps it was because the woman in black wanted to let go of the battle flag at this time. The woman in black jumped back a few meters and casually put the battle flag in her hand on the ground. Durand and Laval quickly returned to the back of the black-clothed woman and squatted down quietly. At the same time, Durand also brought back the dying Mr. Jacques, who was originally caught. "You're back." The woman in black slightly narrowed her eyes at this time, but Ms. May didn't pay attention to it. She casually knocked on Asash's shoulder with the iron sword in her hand. Mr. Essex immediately understood and hurriedly stood up with difficulty, but he didn't dare to speak. "Back." Ms. Maid shook her head and slowly said, "I don't know when I'll be back. I just happened to pass by here. Please don't pretend to be very familiar with me." This woman looks like she hasn't had a haircut for centuries. The woman in black didn't get angry. Instead, the smile on her face became wider. "Very good. This is even better. You don't have feelings for the kingdom of heaven. You won't stop me. Perhaps you will even ignite the flame of revenge against the kingdom of heaven with me." As the woman in black said, she opened her hands. The long black silky hair fluttered in the air, and the battle flag in her hand slowly unfolded. The night sky of Dong Remy Village began to become darker. There were no stars and no moonlight, but it turned into a dim red. It was the dark red when the furnace was about to burn out. "You're too noisy." Ms. Maid's expression was still calm. "Be quiet. There must be rules at night." The iron sword swung toward the dark red sky. There was no brilliance from the iron sword. It seemed that she simply swung the sword at the air. But in the next moment, the dark red sky had already cracked open. It was a huge crack that almost penetrated the entire night sky. The crack was crazily swallowing the color of the entire night sky. Instantly, there were stars and moonlight in the night sky again. There were no clouds. It was a dreamlike starry sky. "It's not the power of the holy light." The woman in black suddenly frowned. Her expression seemed to be more dignified. She lowered her head as if she was thinking about something. But the moment she lowered her head, Lavar suddenly rushed out like a bolt of lightning. Its target was Miss Maid, who had her eyes on the woman in black at this moment. "Be careful," Essex immediately warned, but he didn't finish his words. Miss Maid didn't even look at it. She swung the iron sword in her hand, and the flat of the iron sword slapped Lavar's side, sending him flying. Lavar's whole body was like an iron ball plowing the ground, plowing out a deep pit that was more than 10 meters long. The soil was even emitting hot steam at this time. It was the heat of Lavar's body, which directly evaporated the moisture in the soil. Lavar's 4 inverted limbs struggled to stand up again, but he suddenly fell down again. That terrifying scorpion tail was even draped over his body in a dispirited manner. Essex felt his scalp tingling. This Miss Yi is so fierce. What kind of man can withstand her? Don't kill Lavar. Essex was shocked at this time. Ms. Maid glanced at Essex casually. Are you teaching me how to do things? Essex swallowed his saliva, and his lips trembled as if he was terrified. She was always so polite and polite to others. But why did she become so strict here? I was once a famous handsome man in the city of Freedom Academy. Mr. Jacques seems to be dying soon. Essex took a deep breath. Please try your best to save him. Ms. Yi. I won't let anything happen to him. Ms. Maid looked at the woman in black calmly and said indifferently, even if it's the underworld or the hell, I'll bring him back. The woman in black not far away chuckled. You're not like yourself? You wouldn't be so arrogant in the past. Ms. Maid suddenly became silent. She suddenly exhaled slowly and said, I actually don't want to waste my rare vacation on this kind of thing, but since I'm already here, I might as well clean up some of the things that are left behind in the past. The woman in black suddenly showed an evil grin. She waved her hand, and the huge black battle flag fluttered in the wind. Clean up? What do you want to clean up? Do you want to use your flag? But don't forget that your master has abandoned you. Your flag has been broken into pieces. Miss Maid sighed. One is enough. But if there's another one, I can't stand it. You're too noisy. The moment she finished her words, Ms. Maid disappeared into thin air. That kind of sight and feeling couldn't be captured. The feeling of the woman in black. The woman in black narrowed her eyes instantly. She waved the spearhead of the battle flag instinctively, and the gray and black flames flowed crazily, forming a terrifying vortex around her. The flame vortex rose to the sky and blew away everything in the surroundings in an instant. The woman in black in the flame vortex suddenly stabbed out the battle flag. Ms. Maid's figure just appeared. The woman in black suddenly sneered. The spear completely stabbed her. However, the figure stabbed by the spearhead suddenly faded away. Is this all? The so-called flame of revenge is nothing more than this. The woman in black suddenly turned around. At the moment she turned around, a palm stretched out and directly grabbed her face. She couldn't escape, and the palm seemed to have the power to resist. Finally, the woman in black's face was directly grabbed by the palm, and a huge force immediately pressed her down. Both of her feet were instantly pressed into the ground. Her face was still in his grasp at this moment. His fingers seemed like they were going to crush her skull with a casual pinch. This is not the power of the holy light. It's not at all. Are you mistaken? Ms. Maid said indifferently. When did I say that I need the holy light? And the terrible pain began to spread from her head. The woman in black was horrified to find that the fingers pinching her cheek had ignited a pure black flame. The pure black flame even directly defeated the flame of revenge in her heart. It was far more painful than the burning of despair on the stake, crazily stimulating all her physical senses. And please don't use my face to jump in front of my master. Ms. Maid's voice was slightly cold at this time, even if you haven't started. Then, Ms. Maid's fingers directly tore off a large piece of bloody flesh from the woman in black's face. The woman in black instantly fell to the ground, grabbing her cheek and screaming.